Good evening to you all. Welcome to the Monday, May 8th, 2017 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. I'd like to call our meeting to order and ask if you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy? Ms. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And before we get started this evening, we have some sad news. We've lost some members of our community I'd like to acknowledge, if I could, at this time. Lou Duncan, the mother of our colleague Phil Duncan, has passed away this past week. Also Roy Heath, the father of our city clerk, Celeste Heath, and also Kathy Kay, our former treasurer, city treasurer. So I wonder if we could all observe a moment of silence in honor of our departed colleagues. Thank you very much. They'll remain in our thoughts and our prayers. So do we have a motion regarding the meeting agenda?
I move to approve the meeting agenda.
We have a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We do have a number of proclamations and special presentations this evening. We have the honor of welcoming some very special guests, first of which is Delegate Marcus Simon, who's going to acknowledge some of our employees of the year. So, Mr. Simon, welcome to you. Thank you for coming out this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, members of the council. I love, this is actually one of my favorite meetings of the year. I get to present some awards and some recognition for some of our public servants who've been here for a good long time. They say that current students graduating from college are likely to switch careers like 3 or 4 times in the first 7 or 8 years out of college. These folks that we're going to acknowledge tonight have sort of broken that mold, and that speaks to, I think, a couple of things. It speaks to their commitment to service and to serving the community, and also to the city of Falls Church and what a wonderful place it is to work, where people feel like they can come and make a career and make a life for themselves and stay here for a great length of time. So, and then the other thing this does is this helps me increase my legislative batting average quite a bit. I get to pass some resolutions that actually make it through both houses and become enacted. So with that, I'm going to start off and do this in order. We'll build up to the longest length of service award. But if I can have, is Shirley Tilden here? Shirley, come on up for just a second. I think we'll do a picture at the end with everybody. Is that right, Mayor? All right. But let me just read this to you, Shirley. This says that whereas Shirley Tilden has dedicated more than 25 years to serving the residents of the city of Falls Church, whereas Shirley began working for Falls Church in 1991 and serves as a librarian at the Mary Riley, I practiced this too. Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. It's harder in real life. And whereas during her long tenure as a public librarian, Shirley's helped preserve the written word, promoted literacy, and overseeing the addition of new forms of media to the library's collection. Whereas Shirley strives to instill her passion for reading in all library members and visitors, was recognized with the Performance Award for her role in organizing a summer reading program and that saw a record number of participants. And whereas she has been a loyal and exceptional employee of the City of Falls Church throughout her career, and she was nominated as Employee of the Year in 2001. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that the General Assembly hereby commend Shirley Tilden for her 25 years of service to the City of Falls Church. And resolve further that the Clerk of the House of Delegates will prepare this copy, which I'm to present to you. Okay. So congratulations. Thank you. Next, we have Robert Goff. Robert or Robert, Bob? Robert. Good, that's why we wrote it down. So, it says, whereas Robert Goff has dedicated more than 35 years to serving the residents of the city of Falls Church, and whereas a native of Falls Church, Robert, you graduated from George Mason High School? And following your father's footsteps as a city worker at the age of 17. Whereas beginning in May of 1981, you began helping to maintain the city's sewer and water system for 8 years until you were promoted to utility inspector and placed in charge of inspecting all new water and sewer installations. Whereas in 1998, you were promoted to operations supervisor, managing 28 water and sewer employees, and in 2000 became the superintendent of operations, managing 48 works and public works and public utility staff members. And whereas you oversaw street maintenance, snow removal, leaf collection, the automotive shop, storm sewers, sanitary sewers, urban forestry, and facilities management. That's a lot. And whereas you have been a loyal and exceptional employee of the City of Falls Church throughout your career, and were named Employee of the Year in 1997 in honor of your leadership and hard work. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, the General Assembly hereby commend Robert Goff for his 35 years of service to the City of Falls Church. Congratulations. But wait, there's more. Joe Dowling. Joe is another 35-year person. Whereas Joe Dowling has dedicated more than 35 years to serving the residents of the City of Falls Church. Whereas Joe began working in Falls Church Department of Public Works in April of 1981 as a maintenance worker and was soon promoted to equipment operator, was responsible for the replacement and repair of sidewalks, curbs, gutters, retaining walls, catch basin tops, and asphalt on city property. Whereas Joe was promoted to senior equipment operator, placed in charge of excavation for repairs to water mains, sanitary sewers, and storm sewers, using his skills and expertise to navigate around many utilities during excavations. Whereas Joe Dowling serves as a crew leader of a 4-man team that is responsible for road maintenance, sign replacement, leaf collection, snow removal, and storm damage cleanup. Whereas in 2000, Joe Dowling went above and beyond to help a family in Falls Church that had been blocked into their driveway by a fallen tree after a severe storm. Somebody tells me more to that story that you can tell us later. And whereas Joe's been a loyal and exceptional employee of the City of Falls Church throughout his career and was twice nominated for Employee of the Year for his leadership and hard work, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that the General Assembly hereby commend Joe Dowling for his 35 years of service to the City of Falls Church. Now, if you thought 35 years was a lot, you need to recognize Audrey Luthman. Audrey. So whereas Audrey Luthman has dedicated more than 45 years to serving the residents of the City of Falls Church, whereas Audrey began working for the city in August of 1971, I think there's some members of council that may not have been born, Dad, and helps ensure that children have a safe route to and from school as a crossing guard. And whereas, well liked by her students for her sunny personality, Audrey arrives early and stays late to ensure that her post is well maintained, and she assists the Falls Church Police Department with other projects. Whereas Audrey Luthman has demonstrated firm control over the many types of traffic and pedestrians passing through her intersection each day. Firm control. And whereas Audrey was recognized by the AAA for her courteous and efficient performance as a school crossing guard, as she served as co-grand marshal for the 2013 Falls Church Memorial Day Parade. Whereas Audrey has been a loyal and exceptional employee of the City of Falls Church throughout her career, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that the General Assembly hereby commend Audrey Luthman for her 45 years of service to the City of Falls Church. Congratulations. Audrey, hold on, we're going to take a picture.
After 45 years, she can do whatever she wants.
That's right. All right, and last but certainly not least, we have a 50-year recognition. Sheriff Biddle. So whereas S. Stephen Biddle has dedicated more than 50 years to serving and protecting the residents of Falls Church, and whereas S. Steve Biddle began his career with the city as a law enforcement officer in 1966, which is before some members of the House of Delegates were born. And whereas Steve Biddle was appointed interim sheriff in 1992, and was elected as sheriff in 1993, and has been proud to serve the residents of the city as a constitutional law enforcement officer. And whereas, under Steve Biddle's leadership, the Falls Church Sheriff's Office has upheld the highest levels of professionalism and protected a safe and secure environment for all residents. And whereas Steve Biddle implemented a community-oriented policing strategy that strives to build mutual respect between his deputies and members of the public as they work together to enhance the quality of life in Falls Church. Whereas Steve Biddle has been a loyal and exceptional employee and public servant to the City of Falls Church throughout his career, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that the General Assembly hereby commend S. Stephen Biddle for his 50 years of service to the City of Falls Church. Congratulations. You all want to come on up and get a picture? Just come on up and get a picture.
Come on up, we'll get a picture. The only thing I want to know is how long you have to work here to get a pension, qualify for a pension. You guys, you kept on going. All right. Come on up, everyone. Congratulations, your great work. Come on up. Thank you all for your wonderful service to the community. It's a true honor to be up here with you all. Our next proclamation is a great honor as well. Many of us here had the opportunity to attend a very moving memorial service on Saturday. There must have been 600 or 800 folks there. It was really just an overflow capacity for Mr. Scott, Jim Scott, and a quite moving service and memorial. And we're honored to offer a proclamation this evening. Vice Mayor Conley is going to do the honors. Ms. Conley?
Whereas the Commonwealth mourns the loss of the Honorable James Martin Scott, a dedicated public servant who represented the residents of the 53rd District in the Virginia House of Delegates, and whereas Delegate Scott was a true friend of the citizens of Falls Church, and whereas a native of Galax, Jim Scott grew up in Winchester and earned a bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a master's degree from George Mason University. And whereas Jim Scott began his career as a community organizer with the Fairfax County Community Action Program, worked as a teacher at Edison High School in Fairfax County, and founded the Washington Suburban Institute, which studied the causes of and antidotes to institutional racism in Fairfax County. And whereas Jim Scott saw the need for leadership to build a more inclusive community, and in 1971 was elected as the Providence District Supervisor on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. And whereas, as a supervisor, Jim Scott championed education and anti-poverty efforts, helped draft the Fairfax County Human Rights Ordinance, and was instrumental in the creation of the Office for Children and the implementation of the school-age child care program. And whereas Jim Scott was also an active leader in regional organizations, such as the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, Northern Virginia Regional Commission, Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, and Metropolitan Washington Water Resources Planning Board. And whereas, after serving as the Director of Community Affairs for Inova Health System, Jim Scott sought to be of further service to the Commonwealth In 1991, he was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, where he ably represented the residents of the City of Falls Church, as well as parts of Fairfax County in the 53rd House District for 11 terms. And whereas, over the course of his 22-year career in state government, Jim Scott was the primary sponsor of the motor voter law, supported numerous important pieces of legislation related to anti-poverty programs, affordable housing, women's rights, and worked to expand opportunity for all. And whereas Jim Scott introduced legislation to allow counties and cities to implement affordable dwelling ordinances, which have been implemented in the City of Falls Church to expand the availability of housing. And whereas during his career as a state legislator, Jim Scott represented the residents of the City of Falls Church faithfully and thoughtfully, and helped secure the funding for the Tinner Hill Historic Site, support for the arts, funding for transportation, among many other needs. And whereas Jim Scott met regularly with citizens at the Falls Church Community Center, with the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce, and with the City Council to answer our questions and share his views on matters of importance to the city and the Commonwealth, and he carried out his public service with the highest integrity, empathy, and dedication.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, the mayor of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby honor the legacy of the Honorable James Martin Scott and his service to the city and the Commonwealth of the nation. Ms. Scott, would you like to come forward and receive this proclamation? Vice Mayor Conley?
I just want to add one more thing that is not in the proclamation, because every time I heard Jim Scott speak in Falls Church and he would visit the schools for different things, he always pointed out that one of his first jobs was as a substitute teacher at George Mason High School. So if he was here, he would say that tonight.
Thank you so much. Our next proclamation is declaring May 7th through 13th as Public Service Recognition Week. Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas Americans are served every single day by public servants at the federal, state, county, and city levels, and those unsung heroes do the work that keeps our nation working, and whereas every day of the year and at all hours of the day and night, city and school employees provide critically important public services to citizens of the City of Falls Church and the region, and whereas the City Council and Mayor ask the public to join them in recognizing and celebrating the city's and schools' dedicated employees for their work in providing essential services to the public, including promoting public safety with the highest standards of professional law enforcement, providing a world-class public education for our children, hosting and promoting wonderful special events, enriching our lives with great books and library services, maintaining our streets and sidewalks, providing vital stormwater and sanitary sewer services, developing recreation programs for all ages, caring for the elderly and persons in need, promoting well-planned, high-quality development, caring for our trees, and providing the Falls Church style of personal and responsive customer service at all times, and whereas we ask more of our city employees with each year, and city and school employees always go the extra mile to meet the needs of Falls Church citizens.
Now therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the week of May 7th through the 13th, 2017, as Public Service Recognition Week, and thank all city and school employees for their contributions during the past year, which helped make the City of Falls Church such a great place to live, work, and play. Mr. Shields, should we invite our public employees, school employees, to come on up for this photo? Are they still here? Do they all look like they may have?
They are. Mayor Turner, I would suggest we open this up to all of our public servants, our federal public servants, our state public servants, as well as our city and our local, as well as our volunteers and our citizen activists, because we're all in this together and we're all doing public service together. That would be my suggestion.
All right, that sounds like a wonderful suggestion. Would everyone like to come up pretty much then? We're going to have to get somebody to take the picture, though. I think everyone will be up here in the picture. We have a selfie stick. Celeste, do you want to get in the picture too?
On Celeste.
Okay, we're backing up for this one.
Back of the room.
Thank you all. We appreciate your great service. All right, our next proclamation is declaring Police Week. Mr. Snyder?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed the first proclamation recognizing May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls as National Police Week. And whereas police officers throughout the Commonwealth are dedicated to protecting and serving Virginia's neighborhoods, schools, and families. And whereas police officers risk their lives each and every day in order to ensure public safety and enforce the laws of the land. And whereas citizens value the courage and devotion of the Commonwealth, state, and local police, and the integrity with which law enforcement officers maintain peace and security. And whereas Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day are opportunities to honor officers who have fallen in the line of duty, and recognize the sacrifices made by the families of those officers, and the sacrifices made by families of those who continue to protect and serve our communities.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby recognize May 14th through the 20th, 2017 as Police Week, and May 15th, 2017 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in the City of Falls Church, and call these observances to the attention of all our citizens. Chief Gavin, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reading the proclamation each year. I just wanted to highlight a few things. You know, each year we have the privilege of recognizing Police Week, but our really true privilege is serving the city. I just wanted to highlight where we celebrate, we also mourn. 144 names will go in the National Memorial this year for those officers that died in the line of duty. I would like to highlight one, our mutual aid partners in Arlington County. We lost Corporal Harvey Snook in February 2016. He died of complications of his response to 9/11 at the Pentagon. And so Corporal Harvey Snook will be put on the wall this year. Worked with Harvey for many years. But we take great privilege in working in the city, and we thank you for the proclamation. Just one more highlight, Joe Carter will be riding the Police Unity Tour this year. He starts tomorrow and will end in the Washington, D.C.'s memorial on Friday. He'll be riding through Falls Church at 12 o'clock on Route 50. Gary Laporta usually heads up a group of cheering bunch right above the bridge on Route, I guess, the Seven Corners area. So I welcome anyone in the community who wants to come forward, cheer the Police Unity Tour, Chapter 4, through Falls Church at 12 o'clock on Friday. I'll be out there with Gary and with some signs and flags. But thanks for the proclamation.
Thank you so much. Would you like to come up and receive it?
Closer this time.
Thank you very much. And our last proclamation is, we have two more proclamations. The next proclamation is regarding watershed and floodplain awareness. Am I reading that? Ms. Oliver, would you like to go ahead and do the honors?
Whereas the streams and tributaries that flow both above and below the ground through the city of Falls Church are part of an interconnected watershed system that carries water from our rooftops, yards, streets, and parking lots into the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay. And whereas the city of Falls Church is committed to improving and protecting these precious waters as habitat for plant and animal life, as a recreational resource, and as drinking water for our citizens both now and in the future. Whereas there are currently 213 commercial and residential properties in the Falls Church City portion of the Trips Run and 4 Mile Run floodplains. And whereas the city is participating in the National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system, which recognizes and encourages community floodplain management, through which flood insurance rates may be reduced to reflect the reduced flood risk resulting from community activities that meet targeted goals. Whereas the city provides opportunities to residents, businesses, schools, churches, and organizations to participate in watershed and floodplain education efforts. Whereas many citizens in our community have responded by participating in programs that serve to raise awareness about what individuals can do on their properties, in their homes, and through their transportation choices to improve water quality and minimize their impact on the floodplain. And whereas the city has undertaken a citywide comprehensive effort to examine our watershed and to develop a plan for improving it over the next 10 years. And whereas the City of Falls Church recognizes the importance of increasing public awareness of watershed and floodplain protection.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim May 2017 as Watershed and Floodplain Awareness Month in the City of Falls Church, and urge all citizens to recognize the importance of this observance and to participate in the watershed and floodplain protection activities in our community. Okay, welcome and thank you. Thank you for your efforts in this regard. Do you have something you'd like to say to us in our community?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. This is an effort in Public Works, which actually entails quite a few individuals, and there's two right here I'd like to recognize. One of those is Jason Widstrom, and the other one is Kyle Kling behind me. And so Kyle actually manages this program. And Kyle has been with the city about 3.5 years now. He is one of our CIP project managers, and he also has a certified floodplain management certification, and he's got a bachelor's in business administration, and I think he's got one more class left, and he's going to have his MBA. So Kyle's actually going to speak a little bit. He's going to give you a brief overview of what this program is about.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Kyle.
Good evening. On behalf of DPW, I would like to thank you all for proclaiming the month of May Watershed and Floodplain Awareness Month. The Department of Public Works prides itself on being a leader in watershed management and floodplain management within the state of Virginia. The city's recent promotion to Class 6 in FEMA's community rating system serves as a prime example of our level of commitment to this school, especially over the past year. In the coming months, the department will continue these efforts through such projects as the West Westmoreland Infrastructure Improvement Projects, and by continuing engineering and design for the Wrens Branch and Harrison Branch stream projects. As a department, we greatly appreciate the support that council has shown towards our watershed and floodplain management efforts. Community outreach and awareness campaigns, such as this proclamation, serves as critical pieces that allow DPW to obtain our goals. As a floodplain manager with the city, I look forward to continuing working in these program areas moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming out this evening. Come on up and we'll give you the proclamation.
You want this? Thank you.
Okay, we have one more proclamation, and I would ask Ms. Hardy if she'd like to do the honors.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas the ongoing efforts of the City of Falls Church to address critical issues of health, safety, energy efficiency, and sustainability in the built environment give citizens and businesses confidence that structures are safe and sound in everyday life and in times of natural disaster. And whereas such confidence is achieved through the devotion of building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction and maintenance of buildings. And whereas these dedicated employees and professionals develop and implement the highest quality codes to protect citizens in the buildings where they live, learn, work, worship, and play. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council, the Virginia Building Code Officials Association, and the Building Safety Division of the City of Falls Church. And whereas the theme of Building Safety Month 2017, Code Officials, Partners in Community Safety and Economic Growth, gives all citizens the opportunity to help raise awareness of the importance of building and fire safety regulations, and encourages the continued use of new technologies in the construction industry that drives economic growth in Little City. And whereas, in observance of Building Safety Month, residents and businesses should consider home, business, and community improvements that promote safety and sustainability and recognize the professional review, inspection, and implementation of safety and fire codes provided by the city building safety and fire officials.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2017 as Building Safety Month in the City of Falls Church. Shields, is there anyone who's going to receive this proclamation? All right.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to just mention on behalf of Department of Planning and Development Services, some of the other team members who work with Mr. Frazier, who's also our lead certified person. They've been implementing a number of innovations, including electronic plan review, and then regular meetings that are available to work individually with businesses and homeowners on small and large projects. And so we're very pleased that we're able to provide good service for large and small projects for homeowners and businesses and major developments here in the city. So I wanted to commend Doug and his team for their hard work. 2 years ago, we had an audit. The city's score was increased quite a bit, which also helps insurance rates, and that's due to professionalism and good efforts to add additional education and certifications to your building and safety staff. we appreciate the support of the council in having the positions to do the job well. We look forward to working on a number of projects here in the city, including a new high school someday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership in this department. Let's move on now to the next item. Madam Clerk, are there any oaths of office to administer to new boards and commission members?
Yes, sir, I have two this evening. The first one is Andrew Young for the Environmental Sustainability Council, and if he can just join me. Oh, there he is.
Welcome, and thank you for your service to our community.
So just have you repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Andrew Young,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and I will
discharge and perform
discharge
all the duties incumbent upon me
all the duties
as a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council,
as a member of the Environmental,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations. Give us a quick handshake here.
Much.
And I have Jonathan Ross for the Historical Commission.
Welcome. Thank you for your service.
After me, I state your name,
I, Jonathan Ross,
solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of
and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and the Constitution,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties incumbent upon me
all the duties incumbent upon
as a member of the Historical Commission,
me as a member of the Historic Commission,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Yes, we can do that if you... Okay, so do you want me just to do the whole thing and you can say... So?
You do the whole thing.
Okay, so do you, Jonathan Ross, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Historical Commission, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
Yes, so help me God.
So consider yourself sworn in, sir. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And I just want to
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
All righty, thank you very much. And let's move on to our next item, unless there's anyone else, any other oaths of office to administer? Or is that it, Madam Clerk?
Anybody else any other victims? Anybody else like to be sworn in? I think we're good for tonight. Thank you so much.
Great, well, let's move on to receipt of public comments. Can you summarize the written comments,
I sure
Madam Clerk?
can. We had quite a few comments. First of all, Railroad Avenue Cottage Housing Project. Bradley and Catherine Keister of 1307 Ellison Street wrote in opposition to the project because of limited emergency and traffic access and drainage issues. Stephanie and Joe Dorsey of 1002 Railroad Avenue wrote in opposition to the project because the location was not suitable for a dense development for the following reasons: inadequate parking, number of units, trash removal issues, drainage problems, traffic, and fair housing issues. Tina Hagedorn of 410 Lincoln Avenue wrote in support of the project, Citing the positive aspects of providing alternative housing options for older adults, Linda Neighborgall wrote in opposition, citing issues with the following: density, vehicle access, Nova Parks granting of temporary road access, size of the cottages, age restrictions, parking density, stormwater, and precedents for future applications. She said she was not opposed to cluster housing for the elderly and questioned how the ordinance came about and whether the land would be better used for parks. Allison Miller of 605 South Spring Street wrote in opposition to the project because the location was access challenged and inappropriate for over 55 uses, and because of the impact on property value. Stephen and Debbie Hiscott, 405 North Van Buren Street, wrote in support of the project because of the benefit to the community of providing housing options for 55-plus citizens. Judith and Dallas Mathis wrote in support of the project because it fills a need for housing options. Julie Harrison asked that all staff concerns about the project be addressed before it is moved on. Teresa Twyford forwarded a letter from Ross Chapin of Ross Chapin Architects in Langley, Washington, that commended the project's design. Maria Canelius wrote in support of the project because it fills a need for housing options. Christina New, 413 Lincoln Avenue, forwarded several questions about age restriction enforcement and the current number of homes that may be built on the lots. Julie Harrison also forwarded a drawing of a redesign idea for the project. Nancy Genovese, 505 North Oak Street, David and Claudia Wicks, 412 Park Avenue, and John E. Napolitano, 428 Park Avenue, wrote in support of the project. Elena Toft wrote in support of bike share in the city. And then we had quite a few comments about Founders Row and the planter installation at 7-Eleven. The following wrote with concerns about the planters that were erected at the 7-Eleven and Mike's Deli. Tom Lubnow of 606 Langston Lane, Tamara Powell of the local market, Mr. H. Holcomb, Todd Friedlander, 801 Hillwood Avenue, Sherry and Sid Schwartz, Martha Miller, 521 Meridian Street, Kate and Eric Nessen, and they also asked that the developers be required to secure anchors before moving forward. Stephen Miller, 1005 Jennifer Lane, asked the council to request that the planters be removed. Alex Varouxis, 301 Grove Avenue, asked council to put a stop to the Founders Row project. Mark McGonigal, 912 Lincoln Avenue, questioned how the developer could be trusted. Meredith Donnelly wrote in opposition to the planters. Michael Dolan as well. Joe and Tina Ehrman also asked that council take into account the action when considering any concessions that the developer asks for. Ann Polivka of 1005 Jennifer Lane requested that the planters be removed immediately for safety reasons. Eric Miller, 6621 Moley Drive. Christina New, Lawson Cook, 6935 Regent Lane. Robert Hoff, Walter Zampella, 108 Lounsbury Place. Chris Ehrman, 515 Greenwich Street, also asked that the special exception for the project be rescinded. Linda Neighborgall wrote in opposition to the Founders Row project. Albert Tebbets, 305 Grove Avenue, asked the council to require the developers to have a second anchor tenant before moving forward. Lorraine O'Rourke, 807 Lincoln Avenue, asked that the council grant no changes to the project. Mark Massey, 203 Grove Avenue, withdrew his support for the project because of the change from hotel to apartments and the actions at 7-Eleven. Lisa Varouxis, 301 Grove Avenue, asked that the special exception for the project be rescinded since the developer was not meeting their obligations. And let's see, we also had a letter from David Thurkill, and I believe he also, he asked that the council reconsider the special exceptions given to the project. And other letters, Dwayne Kissick of 2331 Great Falls Street wrote with concerns about sidewalk and road configuration at Great Falls and Northwest Street. And then Ms. Hardy also forwarded a number of letters about the FY18 budget and taxes from John Misley, Lana Morawick, and Marilyn Kay.
Thank you very much. Is that all?
I hope so.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to receipt of public comments. I have a pretty good stack of speakers. So how this works is everyone will have an opportunity to speak. If you haven't filled out a speaker slip, you're welcome to do so now. You'll have 3 minutes. I would ask that you state your name and address for the record. Most of the speakers are regarding the cottage home property or project. You can either speak now, anyone can speak now, or you can wait till the item such as the cottage home project is called and you could speak at that time. It's up to you. If you want to speak later, just tell me. I'll speak later or pass, and we'll get you when the item's called. So let's go ahead in. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Our first speaker is Stephanie Dorsey, followed by Tim Harrison. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Dorsey. I reside at 1002 Railroad Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council this evening. My neighbors and I will address concerns regarding the location of the proposed Railroad Cottages development. Before addressing my points, my apologies if I seem a little upset or a little too passionate about these radical changes being proposed to my neighborhood, my community, where we live, work, and play together as a neighborhood. We do not dispute the concept of developing cottage housing here in Falls Church, nor a 55-plus community. Falls Church can indeed benefit from diverse housing options that are developed smartly and align with existing neighborhoods. Unfortunately, the Railroad Cottages development does neither. It is also important to address in this forum what we consider to be the real problem with this development: the biased and special treatment that this council has given to the rezoning application for a previously declared undevelopable land parcel, apparently for the financial benefit of a favored developer. For this reason, we have retained the legal services of Freelander, and Ehrman of McLean to represent our interests, and council is present here tonight. It remains unclear why this particular location, a 1.25 acre triangle-shaped piece of land located at the end of a one-lane dead-end road in a low-density R1 neighborhood, is ideally suited for this condo development. Allowing the subdivision of 3 lots to accommodate 12 structures, 10 1,500 square foot houses, a common house, a carport, sets a dangerous precedent for the subdivision of other land parcels here in the city. We believe it is not fair or ethical to entertain changes to the zoning laws arbitrarily and have them bent in favor of a popular local developer who has contributed money to multiple city officials' campaigns and businesses. Let me list the other reasons why Railroad Avenue is the wrong location for this development. Inadequate parking. This site plan allows for 13 parking spaces for 10 two-story houses. This is not an adequate number of parking spaces for the projected number of residents. And if this development is aimed at persons 55 plus, why does the current site plan not have any handicap parking, nor oversized parking spaces for larger vehicles? The parking spaces in the Flower Building, also built by the developer, are 8 feet 1 inch wide, which is 6 inches smaller than those found at Harris Teeter. Those 6 inches will make a big difference for ease of accessibility in and out of cars, especially for those elderly persons with special needs. Assuming these 10 railroad cottage housing have 13 vehicles for the 13 available parking spots, where will the overflow parking go? For residents, guests, visiting healthcare workers? They can't park on Railroad Avenue. It's a no parking zone. Furthermore, the location of the carport on the site plan is problematic. It's 10 feet from our property. Let me ask you this. Would you want such a structure within 10 feet of your house? I didn't think so. It's for these reasons that we ask you to deny and vote against the special exception for this rezoning and subdivision. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for yours. Our next speaker is Tim Harrison, followed by Mike Leahy. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Tim Harrison. I live at 1220 Ellison Street. My home is adjacent to the proposed Railroad Cottage development. I have 2 items I want to discuss tonight. The first one is the legitimacy of the petition that we've created concerning this project. During the Monday, May 1st City Council working session, a council member stated that he was unmoved by the petition against the Railroad Cottage development because some signees were not from Falls Church City. He added that he believes some folks would just say they lived here but don't. He closed by saying that having non-Falls Church City residents' signatures on the petition goes to the caliber of the document. There are approximately 210 signatures in total between the online and written petitions. The online version has about 110 signatures, and the written version has about 100 in total. Yes, there are some signatures from individuals living outside the city. However, the supermajority of the signatures are from Falls Church City residents, and this includes current residents from Railroad Avenue, Fowler Street, and Ellison Street, the individuals directly impacted by this proposed plan. Certainly, that is enough to give the petition legitimacy and weight. City council members are open to listening to general anecdotal arguments about nearby cottage communities and surveys or studies from the Seattle, Washington area, as I've heard mentioned in the previous sessions and actually this session tonight. And they should also be open to criticisms from non-city residents concerning this specific project. My next topic of discussion is the potential conflict of interest of the City Council concerning the Railroad Cottage development. It's my belief or understanding that some council members receive campaign funding or donations from Mr. Young. My wife, Julie Harrison, has submitted a FOIA request to the city clerk asking about this question. We're also reviewing similar data provided by the state of Virginia. If this is true, I request that anyone who has received funds from Mr. Young or his development team be removed from the Railroad Cottage decision-making process, regardless of the amount of money. Modification will help maintain the people's confidence in the City Council's ability to make an unbiased and an objective decision. This modification will also maintain the integrity in the overall decision-making process. This adjustment is worth doing even if it takes time and slows the project. I recommend the city attorney or some other appropriate Falls Church official review the collected data and if necessary, find non-conflicted replacements to make this decision.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mike Leahy. I'm sorry. Welcome. Followed by Matt Bella. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks. Thank you, council members. My name is Mike Leahy. I live at 1304 Ellison Street, which is adjacent to the Railroad Cottage properties that we're talking about. I'd like to discuss the stormwater runoff issue. Seems especially appropriate during this month of watershed and floodplain awareness, it seems. As you probably recall, we had some rain last Friday. It was a decent storm, but it wasn't a hurricane. Even so, there was a substantial amount of water flowing through my backyard on Friday morning, coming from the properties on Railroad Avenue. And I could see large volumes of water flowing as well across the yards of my neighbors on either side of me. So I took the opportunity to make a video of the water runoff from the storm. I actually sent it to Jason Widstrom in the Department of Public Works because he seemed to be interested in it. We had talked a few days earlier about this issue. Stormwater runoff is currently an issue I think that we're all dealing with. Railroad Avenue does not have adequate stormwater infrastructure. The folks who live on Railroad Avenue now clearly recognize this problem. The stormwater issue is a problem as well for those of us who live on Ellison Street and the properties adjacent to those Railroad Avenue properties. Stormwater management is an issue for the city to deal with. And in my view, the city should see it as their responsibility to fix the stormwater issue on Railroad Avenue before any new development goes onto those properties. So my concern, of course, is that this new Railroad Avenue development, which will add quite a bit of hardscape to the property right behind us, is actually going to make things worse. Now, the developers have said more than once that they will take steps to ensure that the runoff will not be worse, and that they might even be able to improve the water issue on Railroad Avenue. But so far, we haven't actually heard what those steps are. They have some ideas they're considering, including somehow piping the water to Ellison Street, presumably through one of our properties. But how that is going to happen isn't clear, and whether that will just push more water onto our properties is a real concern. For things like this, vague promises just aren't reassuring. The devil's in the details, so I'd like to encourage the council to require the developers to be very clear about how they intend to handle the stormwater runoff and to make sure that the developers make good on their promises with respect to this and other issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Matt Bella, followed by Julie Harrison. And by the way, when you hear that beeping noise, that means that your 3 minutes is up. And if you could please wrap up shortly thereafter. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Matthew Bella, and I live at 2506 Fowler Street. And I'm actually a resident of Fairfax. And my concern is the parking. I just don't see how these 10 houses can fit into 10 spots. And even the developer has said, where are you going to park your extra cars? And he said, well, it's going to be on the street. And there's no parking on Railroad Avenue. You can't park there. So the only parking available to them is Fairfax County. So all these cars can be parked in Fairfax County. There's some in Falls Church City, but they don't have much parking. Most of their cars, they have guests come over, they park in Fairfax too. So I'm talking to my neighbors, it looks like we need to have, I guess, a parking sticker or a decal to prevent the overflow parking, which is just going to hurt my existing neighbors as well. So I really think the board should look into increasing the parking for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julie Harrison, followed by Joe Dorsey. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Julie Harrison, and I live at 1220 Ellison. I'm not opposed to cottage housing, just not at this problematic location. And let's call them condominiums, because that is what they really are. If the Planning Board and City Council consider applying the special exception for cottage condos to this location, then I think a serious redesign is called for. We all know the main problems with the developer's submission: not enough parking, too long of a walk from the last units to parking and trash, nowhere for stormwater to drain since there's no easement to Ellison. That being said, there are solutions. The first, easiest, best solution is to build these condos in a different location that is not at the end of a dead-end road, not land shaped like a skinny triangle. Since the developer has already purchased the land here at Railroad, I offer an alternative plan for this site. Here goes. Save 20 trees instead of cutting them down because they're actually healthy and are on the fence line of the property. I'm including all the identified tree numbers. Also, save the giant 50-year-old oak tree, tree number 90, on the west side of the site, and in fact, make it the centerpiece of a new pinwheel design and have the cottage condos clustered around it for shade and to provide a gathering spot. I met with the city arborist, Kate Reich, and she said some of these trees could be saved. Also, reduce the number of cottage condos from 10 plus a common house to 5 plus a clubhouse. What is the difference between a common house and a clubhouse? A common house has bedrooms where overnight guests stay. A clubhouse would have no bedrooms, as it is not intended to function as a hotel, but only as a gathering spot. Also, if these are for seniors, why are they 2 stories tall? Consider making them just 1 story. Relocate the entrance to the condo complex to the center and parking to the center instead of at the end. This eliminates the long walk to parking. The walk from the furthest unit is the length of a football field. The carport would be for 5 owner cars in the clubhouse with additional tandem parking for the same units. Make the carport spaces bigger than on the plans because they should accommodate SUVs and people with disabilities. Also, at the end of the carport would be another 5 guest spots, effectively meeting the cottage ordinance, which states all parking generated by the site shall be hosted on the site. That is 2 cars per unit plus extra guests, so my plan would provide 17 parking spots, eliminating any future parking issues. At least 1 spot should be handicapped, since it is a condo complex and required by law. Move the trash and recycle dumpsters to the front and center to make it easy for trash services to get in and out. I spoke with Chris McGow, the city waste coordinator. He said the plans as currently drawn would inadvertently encourage overflow parking to block the dumpsters because they are at the end of the carport area. Lastly, dig a pond, because when I met with Jason Widstrom, who's the city engineering manager, he informed me that if no easement is granted by the neighbors on Ellison, then a pond would be potentially required to capture the stormwater and prevent flooding of the neighborhood properties. He mentioned it would be a large pond about the size of 2 of the proposed houses and could be located on the east side of the property. It would need to be fenced and dredged on a regular basis. Almost done. You should all have a copy of this alternative plan. I hope it sheds some light on the fact that the architect's original drawing is not the only thing that could be built here. There are better solutions that fit in with the neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is Joe Dorsey, followed by Rebecca Tax. Mr. Dorsey?
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm Joe Dorsey, 1002 Railroad Avenue. I live adjacent to the proposed site. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge, as someone who just retired from 31 years of federal service, the years of service that the city employees put in. I was pleased to be here, and it was very touching for me. So, throw that out. I'm disappointed in a couple of things with my city government, my elected officials. Number one is disclosure. My neighbor Tim mentioned that some members have taken some money. We have not heard of that. I've actually had coffee with some folks who expressed an admiration for this project and did not hear about any potential conflicts of interest. So I would ask in the future that anyone that has any kind of potential conflicts of interest in the government, that they please let us know, because we have not heard of them. I believe Robert's Rules or some such thing might advise that our elected officials do so. So I'm disappointed as a constituent, your constituent, and I'm going to tell you right now, I voted for you, and I'm disappointed. Second, the ordinance that you all passed back in November, which was kind of hidden in the Thanksgiving weekend, looking back on some of the tapes on September the 6th at the Planning Commission, it's very clear that this was a single site issue. The ordinance that you all passed was for the City of Falls Church, cottages, wherever there might be a site. Take a look at it. Hour 1:46 and 33 seconds on 6 September planning session. You will note that there's kind of a little disagreement between one of the city officials, the head of the planning folks here, and the folks on the Planning Commission about were there several lots available to meet this ordinance. And as it turns out, there was only one. And this ordinance that you all passed was aimed at one sole location. It was a single site, one use only ordinance. You passed it for your preferred developer. Real quick, just to kick a couple of things that I heard from my Fairfax neighbor, Matt. When Fairfax County puts up their stickers and says no parking, Fairfax only, it's 3.5 football fields from their site to the corner of Ellison and Fowler. 3.5 football fields. Go to the football field at James Mason, walk that 3.5 times. That's how far you've got to walk. Just about done. And if you want to take your trash out and you're at that last unit, it's over a football field in February. The sleet coming down and the raised boardwalk and the sleet and stuff on it to take your trash out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rebecca Tax, followed by Candace DeMatta. Okay, I can't read, I'm sorry, my apologies. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Tax. I live at 303 North Oak Street. I own 2 businesses in the city, Clarendon's Beach Shack and Mike's Deli at Lazy Sunday with my brother David. Mike's Deli has been open in Falls Church for 11 and a half years and the Beach Shack for 10. During that time, we have strived to provide delicious food at a reasonable price while providing employment over the years for hundreds of people, possibly including some of your kids. We've been fortunate to find success and have strived to give back to the community as often as possible. I'm here to express our belief that our success is largely due to our willingness to coexist in our tiny community with many other businesses, large and small, who also put community before self. Our motivation is not the bottom line. Our motivation is improving our community for the greater good. I can't pretend to know every detail of the agreements made between City Council, the boards and commissions, and staff with the developers of the project previously called Mason Row. I am here to tell you what I do know. The developers, I'm going to have to switch tenses because I think we all know that they have since taken down the barrier. The developers had erected a barrier, cutting in half the parking lot we share with 7-Eleven and their owner, Jagmohan Bis. They had posted towing signs that allowed for Mike's Deli parking only on our side of the barrier without our consent or our approval. That gave the appearance that we were behind the actions or at least had sanctioned them. This could not be farther from the truth. This is already had been causing a public safety issue, as there was only one ingress and egress from each side. It was nearly impossible to exit the tight quarters of the 7-Eleven side. Their delivery trucks could not enter and had remained on an already congested section of West Street, and cars were blindly maneuvering around them into the intersection. The tactics employed by this developer are frankly disgusting to me. I believe they were trying to squeeze the life out of Jagmohan's business. He's not a nameless, faceless corporation. He's the kind person who's trying his hardest to provide for his family. He's been doing business in the city for many, many years and paying tens and thousands of dollars in tax consistently. It's very upsetting to me that the powers that be here in the city are more willing to accommodate the developer who has not been able to come through with their promises for anchor tenants while trying to rush through yet another large-scale residential project while treating a long-standing business person with such disdain. These are not the values that I expect from the little city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And here's our next speaker. Welcome.
Hi, Ines DeMatteis. I married into it, though, so I'm not overly sensitive about it.
Okay.
I'm at 2509 Fowler Street, and I'm here to talk about the railroad cottages. I have serious concerns about this proposal as it currently stands. I'm not against cottages in general, but 11 buildings on a little over an acre in a lowest density neighborhood zoning at the end of a dead-end street is just way too much. I urge you to also, when you're looking at the proposal, to not accept the developer's assertions as fact, but to ask critical questions about the proposal, because your decisions implicate not only our neighborhood in this development, but others around the city potentially. I went back through, just like my neighbors, through all the public records and even watched some of the past meetings to understand what exactly is going on, and it was troubling. I found numerous occasions in the development of the cottage ordinance where changes were made that not only favor development on this specific location, but also that favor the specific plans submitted by the developers just a few days after you passed the ordinance. So it begs the question, was the ordinance a product of the developer's plans, or it should be the case, were the developer's plans a product of the ordinance? A few examples include city staff calculations that the fiscal impact of cottage housing is not having any implication for the schools. There is nothing in federal law that says no children. There's also nothing in the ordinance, nor per a discussion I saw between you, Mayor Tarter, and the city attorney, that the city can require no children. Yet that fiscal impact continues with that assumption. Note, the developers also assert this in their proposal. And you should also know that there is experience with other developments that highlight the challenge of enforcing these no children policies. Developers also continue to compare their proposal to 4 single-family dwellings when they can only build 3 as of right, per comments made by city employee James Snyder at the September 6th Planning Commission meeting. Also, in 2013, this property was under contract previously, and a builder sought assurances from the city as to whether he could even build 3 houses. That sale fell through, and that's reported in the media. So it'd be good to know what the city's position was. And this, again, this distinction is important because the developers are asserting that they could build 4 houses as of right for every analysis they make to compare favorably to their proposal, including fiscal impact, floor area ratio, and their trip generation study. Drafts of the ordinance until the second reading included setbacks between dwellings at 10 feet. That changed to fire and safety codes. The proposal only has them at 6 feet apart. There's some others, but one other one I wanted to mention, just between January 17th City Council meeting and the February 13th, 2017 second reading, a new provision was added that allowed a 5% credit on lot coverage to exceed the maximum 25%, and that was if you use solar panels. Note the developers are relying on this 5% additional coverage to exceed maximum lot coverage, and the developer was quoted in the news press 6 or 8 months earlier in July saying he was going to use solar panels. So again, it begs a lot of questions. And I just hope that you will ask these types of questions and use your critical thinking that we, are emphasizing with our children when you review this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Winters, followed by Mr. and Mrs. Andrews. Welcome.
Good evening, Rohini Winters. I live at 324 Grove Avenue, and I wanted to bring to your attention when we are near the edge of the Falls Church City and Fairfax County border on the west end. And a couple of days ago, we had that torrential downpour. There was a construction site that was not properly managing their stormwater runoff. And given that this is, a public works interest item and the month of the watershed, I would like to bring to your attention that when our neighbors don't properly manage their stormwater, it affects our city storm drains. So I have some data in pictures of where that was, and I reported it. It was before Public Works was open. So I didn't file a complaint with the Fairfax County or anything else because I didn't really know what to do. But I think for outreach and for our citizen education, that might be something you could do during the month of the watershed to help us to know what to do if we find or see a violation occurring. Secondly, for the record, I did sign the petition against the railroad cottages. I know there was some concern about whether or not the signatures were legitimate, so mine was. I'm not opposed to cottage developments. I do think that there are too many, it's too dense for that particular location. And I also was concerned about how the ordinance was put into place. And I've had some history with timing, and I don't want to use the word sneak, but I felt like the openness of the staff actions, given the concern of the citizens surrounding certain developments, has been a little bit less than pristine. So I would say we need to, as a city, make sure that we're being open and transparent in everything that we do. And then finally, regarding Founders Row and everything that has happened, I actually like the look of the barricade that they put up, but I wasn't in favor of the placement or the tactics. But it was aesthetically pleasing. It might do well on that corner where the white wall has been for ages. It's kind of an eyesore in the city, so maybe if they need a place to put it, they could put it there. But I'm concerned about the developer not being true to his word that he would put our community and our needs and our interests at the forefront. And we are the little city, and I think now is the time for us to stand up as a city and be united in confronting his approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill and Renee Andrews, welcome. Followed by Ms. Rasmussen. Welcome to you.
Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council, we are Bill and Renee Andrews, and we live at 410 Park Avenue. We've come here tonight to express our strong support for the railroad cottages. 2 years ago, I received a phone call from two of my cousins, both of whom are single women and close to my age. They live outside the area and had for some time been contemplating a move to a warmer climate and to be nearer family. They asked us about Falls Church, and we told them to visit and to see for themselves what an awesome community we have. We discussed their requirements before they arrived. Their single-family home was larger than they needed and needed substantial maintenance. Their new home, exterior maintenance and landscaping needed to be provided. They didn't want to live in an apartment. They would be leaving their connections and their friends. They needed a new home which would be designed to be conducive to resident interaction. They were describing a pocket community, and before they arrived, I read Ross Chapin's book, Pocket Neighborhoods. Chapin's book, as you may know, describes and depicts attractive, creatively designed small neighborhoods across the country, where thoughtful design that fosters resident interaction offers niche, non-apartment housing especially suited to single individuals and seniors. After several days of effort, both in the city and around it, my cousins were not able to find what they needed. Had railroad cottages been on the drawing board at that time, this story might have ended differently. This is now Falls Church's opportunity. A number of our older friends who have been quite active in the city and have looked to downsize have reluctantly moved outside the boundaries of the city, unable to find what they need here. Expanding the diversity of the housing stock of the city is a worthy priority. We need to be a city where those who commit to it can live in it throughout their lives. After 27 years in a single-family home, 4 years ago we moved to a townhouse on Park Avenue. Recent developments on Broad Street, in our view, have made the city a more interesting place to live in and have given the city greater energy and vitality. Increased housing diversity further enhance these qualities, especially in the area proposed. But if you wonder whether the character of the city will endure, given the pace of change that we all face, we suggest that when you walk up Park Avenue during the Memorial Day Parade this year and past 410, look left. You'll see 14 of us, representing 3 generations, including 5 of us who flew in from California to be here just for Memorial Day weekend. We urge you to move the proposal for the railroad cottages forward.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jane Rasmussen, followed by Nels Jorgensen. Welcome.
How are you? My name is Jane Rasmussen. I live at 711 Timber Lane. I've lived there since 1995. I'm speaking on behalf of the railroad property as I have at past meetings. I have some adjectives for you. Isolated, lonely, sad, bored, overwhelmed, scared, and worried. Those are the adjectives I use to describe my mother, who lost my father 5 years ago and still lives in her 4,000 square foot house in Arlington. I will also say some more adjectives: deteriorating, overgrown, empty, depressing. That's what I describe the home that she lives in. I've been trying and trying to get her to move, but the only option that I can find in this area is a condo, which is completely antithetical to anything that she would like to live in. Here's some more adjectives for you: innovative, exciting, forward-thinking, unique, attractive, thoughtful, well-planned. Those are the adjectives that I use to describe the Cottage Railroad development that I have been following for quite some time. I've looked at the plans really closely. I've talked to Teresa Twyford. I've talked to Bob Young. I have followed this very closely, and I think that what they're putting together here is very well thought out. I know there's some objections. They keep talking about a 2-story house. It's 1.5 stories. They talk about parking, but I understand that there's been very careful planning about the parking. They talk about drainage, but they don't mention the water retention system that's being planned. They're concerned about some sort of law that would prohibit the community from putting this 55 and over restriction on that doesn't exist. I heard something about it should be a park. Well, they need to understand this property is going to be developed. If it's not developed by these people, it's going to be developed by somebody. And these people, I'm sad to hear things like unethical and nefarious. I think that this has been very above board. I think that they're just late to the game for whatever reason. I think this idea that Bob Young has been giving scads of money to you all for your campaign is ridiculous, because we've seen those contributions in past in a past scandal. And I think it's just maybe at most $1,000 or $2,000. We're not talking about, a $200,000 contribution to anybody's election here. I think that we're trying to improve the community for the greater good, and the greater good includes all of its residents. And it would be great to have something like this that would be forward-thinking and would put Falls Church further on the map as a community that has multiple types of homes to offer. This is something that I find exciting for my mom. I hope I can convince her to move there. She's having a hard time leaving her house. But this is a way for her to have friends her own age, to have her dog, to have a front porch, to have a home, and not another condo where she has to travel a football field of windy hallways to get to her condo from the parking garage underground. So that's what I have to say. I hope you think about this and that you allow this to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Niels Jorgensen, followed by Diane Dugan.
Thank you. Nels Jorgensen from 304 Sycamore Street. I'm here to speak about the proposed development at Founders Row, Masons Row. It seems that a lot has happened recently with these parking barriers being removed, and I think that's a clear demonstration that the developer does not care about the citizens of Falls Church City. I think most developers only care about the bottom line, that is making more money, and it seems as though the city government seems to care. At least what I read in one of the editorials from the former vice mayor was that the city is going to get around $1 million in taxes as opposed to whatever they're getting now. And I think to make these decisions based solely on money, and now that the developer has demonstrated such clear disrespect for the residents, visitors, and businesses of Falls Church City, I think it's a bit ridiculous that we should even trust them to put something as large as being proposed. There's going to be years of construction. This isn't building new houses. There are houses being built that take 6 months to be built. This new development would probably take, I'm guessing, around 3 or 4 years. Multiple loads of dump trucks full of dirt up and down Broad Street, up and down Park, up and down West, constantly. It's going to be damage to the existing structures because of the vibrations. It's going to be damage to the roads. It doesn't seem as though it's been very thought out, and I think I strongly oppose it. On the issue of the railroad cluster houses, I'm just learning about this today. I haven't followed along with this, but as a firefighter, I believe that 6 feet, for houses to be 6 feet close to each other, is absolutely way too close. The vinyl siding is a fire hazard. If one catches on fire, the one next to it is bound to catch on fire. Even if they're brick, if fire extends out one window, it's going to go up and it's going to catch the roof of the neighboring house on fire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Diane Dugan, followed by Rob Carr.
Hi, my name's Diane Duggan, and I live at 102 Lawton Street. I want to thank the council members that have met at our house with a varied group of Falls Church citizens to discuss our concerns about the Broad and Washington project. We are not opposed to redeveloping this property, as it is one of the most prominent and important intersections in the city of Falls Church. As you all know, the proposed project is made up of 3 separate lots. 2 are currently zoned B2, which are the high-density business lots along Broad and Washington, and 1 is zoned as T1 transitional, which is along Broad and Lawton Street. The 2 B2 lots, with special exceptions for mixed-use residential and height, would provide the majority of benefits for the development, and we especially welcome the proposed office building on this site. The city has long recognized the critical need for transitional buffers on parcels that abut low-density residential neighborhoods to separate them from commercial property. This transitional property was never intended for high-rise buildings or mixed use, as is recognized in the current zoning, the future land use map, and the downtown Falls Church small area plan. Rezoning the T1 lot as proposed to B2 would set an undesirable precedent in the city for all T1 zone lots, as it is our understanding that this is never been done before and is the only spot in the city that would incorporate high-density business adjacent to a R1A zone neighborhood. Under special exception requirements, the height of buildings next to a residential district must be tapered to acceptable heights in that district, or 35 feet. With acceptable stepbacks on two sides and a central courtyard design, this would account for almost all of the lot. A B2 height of 75 feet or more just doesn't fit with what is feasible or desirable here, and such zoning shouldn't be permitted. The proposed project has shown little regard for the surrounding neighborhood by proposing not only to change the T1 zoning, but to ask for a waiver for the setback along Lawton and eliminating the green buffers that we have in place today. This project even includes balconies and transformers on the Lawton Street side. The developer has repeatedly claimed that they have worked to integrate this development into the neighborhood, but the details indicate the opposite. Our key concerns on the T1 lot include we would like a minimum of 20-foot setback from the property line, which is what it is for commercial properties along Broad and Washington. The proposed 57 to 63-foot structure along Lawton with 4 stories of apartments and balconies above 1 story of garage is unacceptable and extremely intrusive to the privacy of the homes adjacent to and across from the building. The apartment should be reduced to no more than 2 stories and a maximum of 35 feet above the garage. We also consider it unacceptable to place transformers and utilities next to the house at 107 Lawton. In addition, nearly 80 trees will be lost, and the remaining 5 trees on Lawton may be severely impacted by construction. The transformers and other utilities should be housed inside the structure, and if the setback was 20 feet from the property line, the tree roots for the 5 remaining trees on Lawton may be saved. Absent the transformers and roof canopy, with a bigger setback, we believe the corner would provide an ideal location for some public green space as a transition to the proposed building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours. Our next speaker is Rob, is it Carr? Did I pronounce that correctly? All right, welcome.
Hi, my name is Rob Carr. I live at 1019 Parker Street, which is across the street from the impacted neighbors that are up against the railroad condominium project. I guess the theme of my little discussion here would be, let's not rush, okay? Quite frankly, I personally think that what they're proposing is the wrong scale for the property, and I am personally very worried about the dumpster noise. I know at the other end of Ellison, down where the shopping center is, that several of the neighbors here and have a lot of complaints about dumpster noise from the shopping center. The trash cups come through 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. Really don't want that kind of problem down at the end of the streets where many of the neighbors I have around me live. But that doesn't mean all development on that property is bad, or even that this cluster community idea is all bad. So again, let's not rush. Take some time to consider some options. Like, I kind of came up with one of my own. What if we reduce the dwellings down to like studio-sized buildings, right? So individual studios, perhaps maybe some of them with like an art loft in it. And rather than targeting an older community, you target an active, young, single community that now is priced out of much of the real estate market in the region. They just can't get here, right? These individuals would want individual storage for their different toys, like their bicycles, for example. This is right along a bike path. The common building could be much simpler. Maybe it's just a pavilion where they can have some cookouts. Maybe there's a frisbee field or a volleyball court or a fire pit that is an outdoor space that qualifies as this community building type thing. And with those types of folks, you can ditch the carport entirely. You know, give each house a single tandem space and you're done, right? They can park out in the rain, shovel snow, just like I did when I was 22, right? And I quite frankly, I think this could exploit the location. Right next to the bike path, I guess I'm hearing tonight that maybe a development at West and Broad that could be attractive to that type of individual. But it does attract, you know, what I think is the next generation of folks that could be living in Falls Church City. I don't think we should rush. I don't think we care if the developer can't make a profit just because he overinvested in what he's bought. But the scale is just wrong for that property, and I think that we should not rush. Take your time and do it right. I didn't hear any beeping, so I'm glad to give you a little bit of time back.
Thanks very much. There you go, there's your beep. Genevieve, I hope I get your last name right, Concannon, did I get that right? Followed by Madge Minor. Welcome.
I'm Genevieve Concannon, and I'm a local area business owner, and I actually am in support of the cottages. There is a current extreme need for this middle housing, and a lot of people might not understand what middle housing is. It is actually the current affordable housing index, and which local regional jurisdictions are calling for right now. Actually, Arlington County just came to the Public Policy Committee over at NVAR, which is the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. Vice Council Member Katie Crystal came and spoke with us and said, you know what, you guys, we're looking for this. We are looking for cottage communities. We are looking for this type of planning. We are looking for the capability of bringing in affordable housing to people that don't want to be in condos, they don't want to be in townhouses, they want to be in small affordable housing. It is not technically affordable housing, it's what people are actually able to afford in our communities. So it's quite interesting that local area jurisdictions are coming and calling for that to the realtor community. And I thought that our constituents would find that interesting. Our region needs this now, and isn't it amazing that Falls Church City is on the forefront to create this option in a smart, beautiful, sustainable way? Sustainability is the key here, and I find it very interesting that this is going to be an Earthcraft certified project. I hear a lot of people saying, where's the stormwater going to go? And that's a lot of what Earthcraft does. Earthcraft looks at the housing as a healthy, energy efficient way to build. They look at the exterior, they look at the siding, they look at the footprint, they look at where water is going to go, because they want to build right, ventilate right, and actually look at where water is going to go on the whole site plan. So that should be something, if the project is built to this certification standard, and I understand that the project's going to be Earthcraft Gold certified, that they should be leading down the right path. The other thing that I heard is that people are concerned about fire issues with the project having the houses being 6 feet apart. It's my understanding that these houses are actually going to be 20 feet apart. So that shouldn't be a concern either. So wouldn't it be a fabulous thing for Falls Church City to be on the forefront of these other local area jurisdictions that are typically kind of creeping ahead of the pack there, to have this new housing option that gives people that are looking for this type of housing the housing options before anybody else. I think it's designed smartly. I think that it's going to give a lot of people options that haven't been out there before. And as someone who recently had my mother in a 7,000 square foot house that my sister and I grew up in, sell it to move to Sun City in Georgetown, Texas, where she gets to go and play with other people, that she gets to look in on the community and be a part of something. And it's interesting when people no longer have that feeling of isolation. Oh, the beeping. So thank you for listening, and I urge you to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Madge Minor, followed by Diana Artemis. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Madge Minor, and I live at 7000 Fairfax Drive. And I'm here to speak also in support of the Railroad Cottage development. I concur very much with the other speakers, with Jane and the couple, particularly about what an exciting and intriguing prospect this is, and how wonderful it would be to have a diversity of housing options in this wonderful community, and to have a middle option. I think there are many of us who have children that have gone through the schools, and they're in college or out of college, and the conversation is often, so what are you going to do? Are you going to stay in Falls Church now that your kids have moved out? Are you moving to a smaller house? Where you're going to go? And it's a wonderful conversation. Many of us have enjoyed the appreciation of our homes if we've been here for any length of time. But there's the problem. We could sell our house and make a tidy profit to downsize. We maybe don't want the big yard, don't need as much space. But where can we buy? Most of the homes in this, that are selling in this community are over $1 million, 1.2 million, 1.3. The houses that are less than that are being torn down to have another McMansion. So to have a middle option where it is a smaller living quarters, you have some outdoor space, but it is indeed affordable, that you don't have to spend that appreciation, that part of your retirement. So I think that's really wonderful. I think it could provide that niche. I'm not unsympathetic to the neighbors' concerns. I've been on both sides of the equation as far as development proposals which were directly abutting my property, both here and in another locality. And so I very much understand their concerns about traffic, parking, public safety, loss of trees, and the change in zoning. And change is really hard if you're used to it, your neighborhood, a certain way. But when I look at this project, I really see some very positive attributes. It's aesthetically pleasing. It is a very nice transition between single-family homes, a little more single-family homes, a little bit smaller, a little more dense, and then the bike trail, and then the commercial properties. So I think there's a nice transition. It's not a shocking, a jarring transition. I think even if there were 3 or 4 houses built there, the trees would still go. When the developers come in, they're going to knock down most of the trees, which is sad and heartbreaking, but that view is going to change no matter what. I think the road improvements that the developers are talking about are very good. They're expanding it, making it safe for fire trucks, but it's fitting within the style, within the neighborhood. It's not overwhelming. I also think that you can't assume that there will definitely be 2 people living there. There are plenty of older single people that are divorced, that want to stay in this area, and they might not be ones that have all the cars. And the proximity to the bike trail will probably encourage people who don't use a lot of cars. And I'll wrap up. I also think the traffic concerns, because they're older people, they may not be in the school hour or the work hour, rush hour traffic-based patterns, so maybe traffic won't be as much as a concern. And I really think this is an exciting proposal. And of course, the final decision needs to be made. Is this a positive development for all of Falls Church City? And I truly think it is. And can it best be worked out to allay some of the concerns of the neighbors? And I think that can be as well. I think some have already been. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Diane Artemis, followed by Mark Turner. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a neighbor. I live in Falls Church, Fairfax County, a few blocks away. But I've had the privilege of serving for the past 3 years as a Providence District 50+ ambassador, which means I get training through the county on working with seniors, identifying their needs, and trying to help them move forward with their lives. I am not speaking on behalf of Providence District. I am speaking on behalf of my 3 years working with my community in neighboring jurisdictions. And I see that this community is exactly what the 50+ community is looking for. It's a low-density area, 10 homes with people who share the same common interests. We'll be looking out for each other. We'll be caring for the land and the space and the neighbors, as seniors often do, giving back to the young with a spirit of community service that older people can give back to the community. The price of these units ensures that you're not going to have deadbeats living there. And the fact that it is maintained by a condominium association ensures that all the properties will be maintained. The concern about having the upper level of 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, in talking to seniors, that is what they want, because they may engage someone, an older person, a nurse, to come and stay at their home and take care of them, and this enables them to have an older person stay and administer to their needs. So I don't think that that's a concern. I really appreciate seeing so much community engagement, and I really respect that because I'm an activist myself, but please, please don't let misconceptions and half-truths cloud your judgment of what this community can mean. Also, I have had the privilege of serving as a volunteer co-chair of a National Sierra Club Sustainability Committee, for which I chaired the True Cost of Homes campaign. And as a volunteer, I had the opportunity to work with architects and communities throughout the United States. And from what I've seen of the developers' plans for this community, you have got the best of the best. The Earthcraft Gold Standard, the geothermal heating is going to be a model. It's going to make this community a vanguard. You are going to bring people from all over the East Coast to look at this community and want to model this for their own neighborhoods. The permeability, what happens to rainwater runoff, you won't have that problem. This is truly, truly a model. It was really a vanguard for the whole United States. So I totally endorse this community, what I've seen, and I ask that you please allow your citizens to meet with the developers and answer their questions about this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Turner, Mark Turner, come on down. Followed by Kim Martin, our last speaker at this point. Welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity. Your patience tonight. I'll give you an update. The Caps are up 2-0 in the bottom of the second. So, my name is Mark Turner. I'm a resident here at Falls Church City. I own a business here, a design business. We have no affiliation with this project, for the record, but we do a lot of pocket communities around the country. I think we have 6 active pocket communities right now. We've developed several of them. I think that the neighbors have legitimate concerns about certain issues. What we study in our business is the kind of the philosophical undertones of why these things make so much sense. Before World War II, we had zoning that allowed middle house zoning, or we had these courtyard style houses. And since World War II, our zoning has really either been super dense or high density or large homes on single family lots. So the result of that is we get these communities that are no longer diverse. And so the old people go here, the poor people go here, the affluent go here, and you don't get this mixing of generations, and it has a real impact on our way about things. You get monolithic groups in the city, and it's happened all around the country, not just Falls Church, but puts tremendous pressure on your school systems. You only have one choice, and Falls Church is one of the more expensive places in this area. So we've lost this discourse of living together with multiple generations and generations of giving back, and the value that brings to discourse and communication. Isolation right now is twice as deadly as obesity in the country. The way we've isolated our communities, and as a citizen of Falls Church, I worry that we're becoming that homogeneous community where we don't offer diversity in age groups and value and communication, and we have an opportunity here to keep an open mind and still address the neighbors' concerns, to provide an option where seniors and people with different income and backgrounds can be part of a city, because that's a little city with a bunch of tear down craftsman style houses is not a little city. It's an affluent area with good schools, and I think that Falls Church is what attracted me to it as a resident, the diversity of it, and this is an opportunity, if it's done right, that can provide an answer that a lot of the country is looking for right now. So thank you for your time, and have a good night.
Thank you for yours as well. All right, we've got just a couple more speakers. Our next speaker is Kim Martin. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Kim Martin. I live at 406 South Virginia Avenue. And the only point that I would like to make with the council is that when we have a developer who's asking for exceptions to be made in order for a new development to be to put into an area of our community, that we are examining that request with great rigor. In my opinion, this is a beautiful bungalow cottage community. It's delightful looking, and I feel like if it was 4 acres, it would really work out really well. This is not a large area, and this is a lot of homes. I'm not 100% sure if this is the same developer who did the post office and the post office building where Flippin' Pizza is, but that is a really unpleasant parking experience over at that building. There's one ingress and egress for the 2 levels, and that just does not make it sort of easy to get in and out of the post office the way, frankly, it used to be a lot more pleasant going to the post office. With respect, that would be my concern with respect to parking. Unlike some other folks, I don't see this really as presenting very much in the way of diversity of housing. I mean, certainly it's offering smaller homes, which is certainly desirable. And I do like the idea of coming up with something attractive so that people don't leave the city when their children graduate from school. But this sounds like it's basically standard homes, very close together, in an area that is not very large. And my last point would simply be that the exceptions in the federal fair housing statutes at least, the exceptions that allow the development of 55+ communities are quite rigorous. And so I would just implore you to be certain that this scenario is going to fulfill that. It is not my recollection, but this is from a long time ago, that any intention of having anybody who is underage 55 living in the building would be permissible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours. And our last speaker, and I'm sorry I can't read the writing very well, Frank, is it, excuse me? Anaya, okay, welcome.
I'm here to just kind of give you my view. I've been living here in Falls Church for 32 years. One thing that I saw that we had a big old problem with a few years back, probably about 15 years ago, your developer that developed your project up on Gordon Avenue, up on the top of the hill there, he was supposed to dump that water onto Route 7. That never occurred. What happened? Falls Church got flooded out. Really, really bad. Everybody down Park Street, right across the school there, got completely wiped out because all that water came down. That's because you guys did not follow through with your developer what should have been done. That's one of the things I saw in my lifetime here, out of 32 years. Second of all, you've got the Fellows track right across Falls Church, TJ Elementary School, 1.8 acres. Perfect. 10 cottages, road, everything's there, parking, everything's there. But the city council will not do it because Falls Church City Schools wants to take that property over because you guys made a bad deal on Daniel's, elementary school up there. Right now you're paying interest on $14 million and nothing's being done. That's what I've seen. In my 32 years, it's really sad that, I've witnessed all this stuff. I've been here 32 years. I'm 65 years old. I'll tell you what, 65-year-old man like myself, I will not buy a cottage right there for $7,000 because I can go somewhere else in the United States and with $700,000, I can live high off the hog and buy 10 times as much as that. I'm not opposed to the project in Railroad Avenue. I knew all the people that lived there, that died there, Louis, John, they were good friends of mine. I know a lot of people in this town. I can see a 5 cottages, I can see the project, but like I said, you've got a perfect Fellows track. But you know what? You guys are going to take that property away from that person that owned it, the lady that died. Their family wanted to develop 4 houses on it, which is according to the regulations and stuff like that. You could put those houses in there, but no, you guys put in stipulations. You were concerned about the parking, the water. You were concerned about everything on that property, and that you're not concerned about Railroad Avenue. I'll tell you what, next 4 years, I'm out of here. It'll be 36 years I spent here. Half my lifetime in Falls Church, half my lifetime in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'm really disappointed in such a city council like yourselves that you let this stuff happen to everybody here. But you know what? I'm just a regular, I'm a nobody to you guys. I'll be gone soon. But I'll tell you what, man, don't make it hell for these people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is our last speaker who has signed a speaker slip. If anyone else would like to speak, you can fill out a speaker slip. Believe it or not, we haven't even started the Railroad Avenue hearing. This is the public comment before our hearing starts, so. Thank you, sir. So we're going to move now to briefly hear if there are any council requests. Are there any council requests? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, this is not concerning Railroad Avenue because we'll be discussing that later, but the comment from the Lawton Street neighborhood, when is the next time the Broad and Washington project is going to be available, and what are they doing to meet with the neighborhood? That would be one question. Second question relates to the Founders Row project. That is, I'm very interested in the city demanding from the developer why they did what they did and obtaining a commitment that they won't do it again. Thank you.
All right, any other council requests? Ms. Hardy, then Vice Mayor Connolly.
Yeah, on Founders Row, I want to see if the city manager in his report could also just report out on, I guess, the investigation we had done on our end. My understanding is that we had looked into building, fire code, other public safety hazard concerns, and we found that we had no basis for kind of finding a violation. So I would love for the city manager to just give more context for the public's benefit of the context that happened behind that.
All right, Vice Mayor Connolly.
And my request is just related to the comment from Dwayne Kissick, who had concerns about the sidewalk and road configuration at Great Falls and Northwest Street. I know we've talked over time about that project and working with Fairfax County on improving that intersection. I just would like an update on where we are and how wherever we are fits with Mr. Kissick's concerns.
All right, are there any other council requests? For the benefit of the public, we will next move to the city manager's report, and then shortly thereafter, we'll get into the hearing on the cottage housing proposal. Mr. Shields?
Mayor Tarter, members of council, as listed on the agenda, I was planning to allow Mr. Stoddard to provide the council with a briefing on bike share at this point in the meeting, but in discussions with the mayor before this meeting, we think it'd be better to, let's get on the business of the agenda, and we'll ask then for that briefing to occur after the Cottage Row item on the agenda. So anyone who's interested in bike share, please stay, but that will come later in the meeting. I was asked to speak a little bit about the planters, the barriers that were installed last Friday in front of the 7-Eleven, or between Mike's Deli and the 7-Eleven. Just a little bit of background on that. Approximately 10 days ago, the city became aware, I think through one of the other property owners, that there was interest by Spectrum Development to put in some barriers between the parking lots. The city asked that that not happen so that we could have some understanding as to what it is they proposed, and so we could evaluate if there were permits and that sort of thing required. The zoning administrator and the fire marshal and the building official were consulted. Plans were not submitted. A permit was not applied for, but it was the opinion of the code officials that because this is an old site and there's no site plan extant for this site, that there was no real regulatory hook for the city to either permit or not permit the installation of a separation between those parking spaces. We did indicate our view that it was something that we would discourage them from doing, just from a traffic flow and from the fact that this is a 40-year-old shopping center that's functioned a certain way, that this would be very disruptive. We did express that view. The planters were installed on Friday, and on Monday today, we were informed that the planters were being removed. And we're pleased that they're removed. We don't anticipate that they'll be back. That's a quick summary of what I know about the planters over the past 10 days.
All right, any questions for Mr. Shields? No? All right, why don't we move on? Madam Clerk, will you call the first item, please?
Yes, sir. We have TR 17-15, resolution to grant a special exception for a cottage housing development in the R1A low-density residential zoning district on approximately 1.25 acres of land located at the east end of Railroad Avenue and comprising 3 parcels, real property code numbers 52-102-030 through 52-102-032, known as Railroad Cottages, on application by Railroad LLC.
Mayor Tarter, members of council, our senior planner, Carly Aubrey, will provide the staff report. I will just say, just at the outset, just a couple points on background for this application, a couple things I will note. The staff recommendation tonight is that this application be referred out to boards and commissions. The special exception process is the city's highest level of scrutiny that we can give to a land development case. It does allow the city to have a back and forth and a negotiation for improvements on the site to address neighbor concerns or any concerns that are raised through the process, and to try to meet broader public goals as part of a development than we would otherwise have the ability to do in a by right development. We did note in tonight's comments that there were several comments about access to staff, and I just want to commit that if this application does move forward and is referred to boards and commission, that access to staff will remain there. We want to hear from neighbors. We won't necessarily be able to address all concerns, but we will certainly listen, and we will make every effort to address the concerns that we can. That's the special exception process, allows that dialogue to happen in a way that really isn't possible with a by right development. One thing I will note, just in terms of history on Railroad Avenue, in 2006, the City Council declared that Railroad Avenue is a street. It was a substandard street. It was 14 feet wide. And the reason it was 14 feet wide is that the Park Authority really wasn't willing to grant a larger right-of-way. And it was the City Council's view in 2006 that out of an appreciation for a very difficult situation for the property owners at that time, that their parcel was essentially landlocked. And so the City Council was petitioned by those property owners that they be given legal access to their lot along a route that had been used for as long as anyone could remember, and which the city had in fact helped pave and take care of over time. So the City Council did make that declaration, but there was a problem in that with respect to the fire marshal's perspective, 14 feet wide is substandard, and there was always a concern about fire access back there for the houses that were built by right, as well as the future ones that might happen back there. And through the special exception process, there has been a discussion with the Park Authority, not about a granting additional right-of-way, but by creating a structured surface that largely does address the fire marshal's concerns. And through the special exception process, the council can also impose conditions or obtain concessions that will further meet the fire marshal's concerns about development on the site. So that's just a little bit of background that I would say. Ms. Aubrey will provide a staff report. Our intent is to then, after that, have the developer present the project, and then we will go from there. Ms. Aubrey.
Evening, Council. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, kind of follow up on what the City Manager said. Cottage housing developments are allowed in the R1A zoning district after receiving approval of a special exception from City Council and then a subsequent site plan review and approval by the Planning Commission. This is the same process used for mixed-use developments proposed in the B zoning districts. The process to date is that the application was submitted in late February and was sent to staff for review. Comments on the first submission were sent to the applicant, and a second submission, including responses to staff comments, was received in late April. The submission is currently under review by staff. Staff comments on the first submission are included as attachment 2 in the agenda packet, and the second submission, including the responses to staff comments, are in attachment 1. The Planning Commission held a work session on April 17th. The City Council had a work session on May 1st. The next steps is the request at tonight's hearing is to refer the item out to the following boards and commissions: the Planning Commission, Architectural Advisory Board, Economic Development Authority, Housing Commission, Human Services Advisory Council, Environmental Sustainability Council, Tree Commission, Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, Arts and Humanities Council of Falls Church, Library Board of Trustees, Historical Commission, and the Village Preservation and Improvement Society. The application would be discussed at the boards and commission meetings, and a mandatory recommendation from the Planning Commission on the special exception request would be required. It is anticipated that the special exception would come back before the council in July for an action on the resolution. This map shows the Proposed project site, the uses to the east, west, and south include single-family dwellings, and the uses to the north include the WNOD Trail and the city's property yard, Fairfax water offices, homeless shelter, and a couple auto body businesses. The distances refer to about a fifth of a mile from West Broad Street and transit options that are available there and shopping. And then the 2/3 mile is an indicator of how far it is from the West Falls Church Metro Station. As proposed, the project would include some of the following, or not be limited to the following elements: 10 cottages, each approximately 1,500 square feet in size, 1.5 stories, and 25 feet in height. One common house, approximately the same size, height, and stories, and containing kitchen, dining area, social interaction area, and a guest room. Shared open space throughout the site. Clustered parking with a carport over 10 parking spaces and 3 uncovered parking spaces. Age restricted for persons 55 years of age or older, including a provision that no residents shall be under 18. Landscape buffers 10 feet width around all property lines, and a 6-foot width extension along length of Railroad Avenue through the use of grass pave for a total road width of 18 feet, and improvements at the end of Railroad Avenue to provide space for fire engine turnaround, an additional fire hydrant, non-combustible siding, fire sprinkler suppression systems, and other fire safety related items. The Fire Marshal, Tom Polera, requests that his comments be read tonight. He was unable to attend. He states that the fire safety concerns regarding the Railroad Cottage project have been addressed by the developer. Currently, the street is substandard and unable to accommodate emergency vehicles, creating a serious public safety risk for the existing homes and our first responders. The improvements by the developer to widen Railroad Avenue will directly benefit these life safety concerns for the existing homes on Railroad Avenue. The cottage housing ordinance has 2 main sections against which this project is being reviewed. One is criteria considered essential to the character and well-being of the city, and 2, standards for cottage housing development. The criteria for the cottage housing, one of them is to provide an age-restricted community as provided under federal law. The applicant is proposing 55 years of age and over. Voluntary concessions were updated and submitted late last week, and it now includes language regarding age restrictions, and future documents related to covenants and deeds would be reviewed by staff. The cottage housing development should provide a coordinated site design, encouraging social interaction, minimizing the amount of impervious surfaces, and promoting low-impact development. The proposed development, the cottages all have front porches facing a common walkway, and the common house is proposed. The proposed paving on the site would use pervious materials and wooden walkways, and proposed low-impact development techniques include pervious pavement, rain gardens, and capturing the first inch of rainfall from roofs and parking areas. Another criteria is that it includes community amenities for residents and connectivity to surrounding areas and a sense of community. Again, in addition to the common house and the walkway, additional common space is indicated to either side of the walkway, to the east of the common house and to the east of Unit 3, the far eastern unit. The site is adjacent to the WNOD Trail, which provides connectivity to the shopping, recreation, and transit options on West Broad Street. The applicant states that there is room for a community garden, and the condo association would sponsor lectures, group classes, and outings. A draft transportation demand management plan has goals to provide travel options that allow residents to age in place and demonstrate that the number of parking spaces provided is consistent with city code and accommodates travel demand. Some of the elements in the TDM include secure bike cage, shared bicycles, carpool board, and kiosk with information on transit options, bike routes, walking routes, and commuter connection information. Another criteria regarding design and needs to include design details that provide visual connection between the development and the surrounding neighborhood. The cottages include design and color details similar to existing homes in the area, such as front porches, roofing materials of composite shingles and metal, and siding, building modulation, and no blank walls. The massing models that have been provided by the applicant shows a relation of the development with surrounding residences. The proposed cottages would have overall less height and massing than most of the houses in the surrounding neighborhood. And the cottages and common house adjacent to Railroad Avenue are around the same distance from the road as the existing homes along Railroad Avenue. Additionally, the required landscape buffers and tree canopy would provide screening of the development from adjacent residences. Another criteria is to be LEED Silver or equivalent green building certification program. According to the updated voluntary concessions, the applicant intends to achieve Earthcraft Gold certification. And the last criteria is that the entire site needs to be within 500 linear feet of a designated revitalization area. And this shows that the site is within 285 feet from the West Falls Church revitalization area. Cottage housing standards, there's many of them to include special provisions. I'll just point out a few of them. One is a 45,000 square foot minimum is required. The site is 3 lots totaling around 1.25 acres. The lots would be consolidated into one lot, commonly owned and maintained, if the special exception and site plan are approved. For lot coverage, the maximum building coverage of 25% and a maximum impervious surface coverage of 35% is required, which is the same as single-family houses. The ordinance does allow up to an additional 5% of building coverage if solar and green roof components are incorporated. The proposed impervious surface coverage of the project is approximately 33% through the use of pervious materials and building coverage of 26.09%, which is about 1.09% over maximum allowed, and they are including solar panels. Landscaping and tree coverage, the ordinance requires and the applicant is providing landscape buffers around the perimeter in addition to the same tree canopy coverage required in the R1A zoning district. And as far as parking, ordinance requires and the applicant is providing 1.25 spaces per cottage dwelling unit. Additionally, the site is adjacent to the trail. This provides connectivity and walking, biking options. And again, the applicant is proposing a TDM. And a trip generation summary was provided by the applicant, which estimated a comparable traffic generation rate between the project and 4 houses. These last 2 items are being reviewed by staff as part of the second submission. During the City Council work session, there were several items raised. A couple will be addressed by the applicant, and information was provided in the staff report. These include answers to the statements and questions on the handout provided by the neighbors at the walking tour, and a sketch plat demonstrating if the property could be developed into 4 lots. Some of the other items, a comparison of potential buy right versus cottage housing. Table on page 8 in the staff report includes very estimated kind of generic comparison of 3 or 4 lots versus the cottage housing development in terms of building and impervious surface coverage, setbacks, height, landscaping, estimated residence. Fiscal impact has been provided by the applicant. This has not been done by the city. Our fiscal design analysis or model is really designed for higher level, more intense developments. The condo docs and deed restrictions will be, some has been updated in the updated voluntary concessions, and these documents would be reviewed by city staff to ensure enforcement capabilities. Ongoing discussions will be had regarding Railroad Avenue maintenance, and the applicant intends to do more public outreach with the neighbors. So I'll conclude by just again saying that this is a request to refer the item out to boards and commissions. And I can take questions now, or I can turn it over to the applicant.
Why don't we go ahead and turn it over to the applicant? Welcome, thanks for coming out. No need to repeat what we've just heard, so keep that in mind.
I will not repeat what was just said. My name is Bob Young. I'm I'm the developer for the project, one of 4 partners. What I'm planning to do tonight is, at the request, you've already seen the project. Staff has laid it out. You've seen it once or twice or 12 times before. What I'd like to do is, as council requested at the work session, first respond to the neighbors' comments that have been made in substantial detail. This is all in your packet. I won't go through it, of course, word by word. We'll then follow that with a side-by-side comparison of a by right project, again as requested by council, a by right project compared to the proposed cottages, and then I'll finish up with some summary items with respect to how we see the project and how it might benefit the community. So, starting here, as you see, we believe the traffic, whether it's a by right project, the concerns have been expressed with respect to the dead-end project, dead-end road that will be congested. Whether it's a by right project or cottages, the traffic is pretty much identical. We think that we have provided sufficient parking, particularly when you take into account the TDM that we're proposing and that we intend to implement with great vigor. We met with a number of folks who are interested in purchasing cottages just last night and discussed in some detail with them how we might persuade those who are couples to basically get rid of the second car. And we think we made some progress on that. Stormwater drainage, we hope to submit a site plan fairly soon that, of course, has every single detail that the city requires, which, believe me, is a great deal of detail. It's very clear that we can likely help ameliorate the current situation, but under no circumstances would this project exacerbate the situation. Personally, I think it can't do anything but help. There were concerns about a zoning change. As you all know, this is not a zoning change. This is a special exception that attempts to meet the requirements of the new cottage zoning code. Density issue. We've argued in a number of places. We believe accurately that if you look at what would be 4 by right houses that we all know would be very large, the kind of summary of it is that there would be about twice as much volume of cubic footage in 4 new single-family houses as there would be in our proposed cottage project. I might add parenthetically at this point that I'm personally experiencing what it's like to have a very large, very, very large house built next to my house, which by comparison is about half the square footage of what's being built. It's not a fun experience. Some of you may have had the same experience. So we think that this proposed cottage project is far superior to a project of 4 single-family houses. There's concern about these houses being too close together. Don't believe they are. Number one, it's important to note that their proximity is governed by the code, the building code, which is Virginia, both Virginia standards and local Falls Church City standards. These units are permitted to be 6 feet apart. They are in very small parts, but for the most part, they're much further apart than that. As you know from your packet, these cottages would be sprinklered. The siding would be cementitious, therefore non-combustible. We have spent a great deal of time with the fire marshal, and in fact, we spent a great deal of time with the Falls Church City Fire Marshal, with the Arlington Fire Marshal, and with the with the Fairfax County Fire Marshal. In a meeting with all of them, as you know, all of those jurisdictions respond at one time or another to fires in Falls Church, and your city fire marshal wanted to be very sure that what was being proposed he felt was acceptable, but he wanted to make sure it was acceptable to the neighboring jurisdictions. Wrong location. We think this is actually an excellent location for a cottage project. This is really a transitional piece of property. It's not only across the street from the city's property yard, which is not a beautiful view, but it has in very close proximity a cement plant. Could single-family houses be built here? Sure. But we think this is a terrific transitional use on a property that's on the trail that would, if it were to finally be approved, would allow us to implement the city's vision for that particular part of the trail where we could establish a Welcome to Falls Church per the plan that was adopted by council several months ago. Sidebar with respect to the long walk. We've been very conscious of that. We kind of think that's an internal problem, but leaving that aside, the walk is absolutely no longer than if you parked in the parking garage at the Broadway or the Byron or any of the other condominium projects, and you went up the elevator and down your hallway. It's not very much different. Our architect has been able to find not only a farm cart that could be used, we'd have 2 or 3 of them there so that the residents could use those to transport suitcases or groceries, but he found a mechanized one so they don't even have to pull it. School children. Let's talk about school children. I don't know how many times I need to say it, but I'll say it as many times as necessary. There will be no school children in this project if it is approved. That is parenthetically not the case if there were 4 single-family houses here. Now, we have been asked to verify that the 1995 federal code permits us to restrict not 80%, but 100% of these units to those having one person 55 or older. And in addition, that same federal code permits us to put in a deed restriction, as with the 55 plus, for 100% of the units. A deed restriction that no one under the age of 18 could live in this community. Those would be deed restrictions that would go with the land in perpetuity. Now, we have an opinion of counsel from Walsh Gallucci, our attorneys, saying that this indeed is legal. We then discussed this with the city attorney, who also agrees that it is legal. The city attorney, however, went one step further and asked that we include in our voluntary concessions those same commitments. We have agreed to do that. They are in our draft concessions. And the idea there is if sometime in the future the condominium association does not enforce those rules, both of those rules, even though there's a required federal certification on an annual basis, because of the voluntary concessions, the city would be allowed, the city could then step in and enforce those deed restrictions. Tax impact. We submitted a pretty straightforward comparison where there was not a lot of difference between 4 houses and the cottages as proposed, but then we went back, I should say really that I went back and said, you know, if there are 4 houses there aren't going to be 0.63 kids per house. That's a ratio the city uses citywide. The reality is, as I'm sure you all know, there will be 2 and probably 3 school kids in each of those houses. I again refer to the house being built next to me, which I'm sure will be a very nice house, and we'll have 3 children aged 6, 4, and 2. That house alone will cost the city $50,000 a year just to educate the kids. Forget about police and fire and all that kind of thing. The difference between the taxes on one of those houses and the cost to educate 3 kids is a lot of money. So the tax impact is pretty substantial. The impact on the W&OD trail, we believe, will be very, very positive. Right now, there's a vacant site that, as you know, has not been the prettiest thing for the past decade or two. We've cleaned it up, and we think it will provide an extremely attractive entrance to the City of Falls Church on the W&OD trail. Vegetation and trees. We had an interesting Saturday afternoon some weeks ago where we met with the Tree Commission on site. We met with Councilmember Z, the city arborist, the city sustainability director, and some other folks, and we went all around the site with the city arborist pointing out the trees that could be saved. We've since done a formal study, and we will indeed be able to save the trees that she believes can be saved, which, by the way, if there are 4 single-family houses, there's no requirement to save any tree. None at all. You can mow down all the trees and plant a few 1-inch trees, and there you go, folks. In addition to which, single-family houses, there isn't any transition screening. You can pretty much do what you want. Put the jungle gym up, not plant anything anywhere. The requirements on this project under the code are very, very, very substantial. And I can assure you that if it's ever built, the screening will be so thick that in 5 years we'll be ripping trees out because they'll be killing one another. Unrealistic drawings, we think that since all of our drawings are to scale, they're all pretty realistic. Now, we're asked to do a comparison side by side if we were to build 4 single-family houses versus the cottage project as proposed. Now, a lot of this is repetitive. I'm not going to go through every one of them. I'm, of course, happy to answer questions, but we've talked about traffic. Parking, we believe there's adequate parking, as I've discussed. Stormwater management, same thing. And all of this material is in your packet and certainly available to the public. Not a lot of difference between single families and what we're proposing in terms of their closeness to the houses. We've addressed the issue of the wrong location. We think this is the right location. The long walk, I've already addressed that as well. We think that we have a responsibility to design this so that it's feasible. And in the end, if the walk's too long, nobody's going to buy these. And that'll be our tough luck. But we've had enough focus groups, we've had enough discussions with the many people who have expressed interest in purchasing here that we believe the project's perfectly viable. I talked about the school children ratios. I truly believe that it will cost the city a great deal of money forever if there are 4 single-family houses here, and there'll be a net positive benefit to the city if the cottages are built. We've talked about the W&OD, vegetation, drawings of the houses. Go ahead. We thought this was an interesting comparison. We were asked to do some drawings to show to scale what this would look like. This is the Dorsey's house right here. Instead of 15 feet, it's 10'6" from the property line. Long story to that. This is the outline of the proposed carport. This is the outline of a likely house that would be built on the lot next to the Dorsey's house if there were 4 houses built here. This is, again, to scale the closest cottage to our neighbor. Shows without the imposing house, the relationship here. So let me conclude just going through very quickly what we think makes this a truly great project. You've heard discussion before about the middle housing need. It's a real need. Roughly a third of the houses in the city of Falls Church are occupied by seniors, what you might call empty nesters. Cottage ordinance, which took many, many months and a great deal of work on everybody's part, was adopted recently, and this project has had to be tailored to that. There's no choice. This is what the code says. Those are the rules. One has to propose a project that is consistent with and subject to that zoning code. Talked again about the deed restrictions, about the school seats. It is what it is. There will be no children, and there will be all of the households will have at least one person 55 and up. Let me clarify. Someone who's under 55 can own one of those units. They just can't live there until they're 55. We have at least a couple of instances where it's likely that there are children of folks who are older and retired who would likely buy one of these units and have their mother or their father or both live there. Talked about the traffic and the fact that it's basically no difference between 4 houses and 10 cottages. Also talked about parking. Certainly there might be questions. I'd be glad to answer those, but we again believe if the project is viable and people want to pay a lot of money to live there, they'll have to be satisfied that there's adequate parking. We believe there will be. Density again, this is a 25-foot high restriction, which means there won't be any point that's higher than 28 feet or so in our case, as opposed to a single-family house that can be, to the peak of the roof, 40 feet tall. It's a very, very big difference when you have that house looming over yours. I might suggest that some of the houses back on Ellison that back to this project are very large, very tall houses, and they will be looking down, in some cases, on these small cottages. But the small cottages are not going to be able to visually impact on those houses. Very, very significant buffer planning. Keep in mind, please, that in order for this project to be finally approved, not only does it have to have a special exception, but it has to have a site plan approval, which is, as I'm sure you know from experience, extremely detailed down to the last gnat's eyebrow, if you will. So there will be a public hearing, at least one, with the Planning Commission, which would have to approve the site plan. We think that we can, as I said, significantly impact in a positive way the existing stormwater problem. There have been some concerns about noise, and I'd make a couple of points. Number one, our geothermal does not have compressors. I want you to imagine, if you would, 10 cottages with compressors outside on a summer day. It'll sound like a bumblebee farm. That will not happen here. However, the folks living in the cottages will have the benefit of listening to the compressors on their neighbors to the rear, but that's something they'll just have to get used to. The geothermal is a very important part of the sustainability of this project. It's expensive, and the folks that we've talked with realize that. It's extremely beneficial from an energy consumption point of view. I have geothermal at my house, and my electric bill is probably about half of what it would be with a normal system. So that's an important part of the sustainability. All of our lighting outside will be dark skies compliant, so there will not be any light pollution of any kind. We think the cottage project will be quieter and less intrusive than 4 single-family houses by quite a lot. just talked about some of the sustainability features. They're listed here. I won't go through all of them, but we've worked very, very hard to make this a really exemplary project, a very green project. We've talked with members of the Sustainability Council, and of course, if it's decided tonight to refer this out to boards and commissions, we'll be spending quite a lot of time with them. Heard the letter from the city's fire marshal, read by staff. Trust me, it was very, very hard. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort to convince the fire marshal that this was an improvement, and I believe he now thinks it's a very, very significant improvement, not just for our project, but for a dangerous situation that exists on Railroad Avenue today. Finally, fiscal impact. I think that if four houses are built there, the negative impact on the city will be about $170,000 a year, and that's probably conservative, and that will simply go up every year. We think the proposed cottage project is much preferable. I kind of see this as a binary decision on the part of the council. We're not asking for final approval tonight, as you well know. We're asking that council vote to refer this out to boards and commissions, of which, as you know, there are many. Give us an opportunity to meet with the boards and commissions, continue to meet with the neighbors, as we have been. We have another meeting scheduled with the neighbors for, I think, May 17th. There have been some one-on-one meetings as well, and we certainly intend to continue to work with the neighbors as best we can to get the facts out and to address their concerns as best we can. So, in summary, I ask that council vote favorably to refer this out to boards and commissions tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Before we get to, it looks like there are some questions. So is there anything additional staff wants to say at this point? All right. We'll go ahead and take questions, and I'm going to open it up to public comment once again because to see if anyone else has anything to say. Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions. I first of all want to thank, before I get to them, I want to thank the members of the public for their diligence and their concern about the quality of life as well as what's best for the future of the city. We've heard both positive comments for this project as well as negative. There's one point I want to make along the way here because I think this is the beginning of a probably very long process of involving a lot of people taking a look at the project and trying to make it the best it can. There have been I don't know how to put it, aspersions, derogatory comments about people on council. They certainly must be taking in money from their favorite developers, and I think that's, I'm just disheartened. I think that's very sad for the people that I've walked to all your houses, asked for your vote to serve you to the best of my abilities, to bring the knowledge I have and experience on behalf of the city and of its constituents, that you would think that I would take any money from any developer. Taken no money, no consideration, have not asked for in-kind services from any developer that wants to work in the city. Let that be clear. And don't bring that in front of me again. Having said that, there have been questions about the effect of guests off-site parking, and people from Fairfax County that have said you'll likely end up parking in front of our house. I suppose you have some answers to that. I'd like to hear that, either from you or your team. Also, with regard to the trash pickup, what kind of dumpsters or containers will we have? We do know that service for dumpster cannot begin before 7 o'clock in the morning, but perhaps there are other kinds of things that you are thinking of doing or planning to do that would ameliorate that concern. I mean, no one wants to hear a big dumpster being emptied no matter what time of day it is. So, and also, I don't think I was the one that asked this question, perhaps the mayor, with regard to dark sky lighting. One big concern would be those people driving to the carport at night, and what would prevent the headlights from illuminating the neighborhood, since we are aggregating all the parking in one place. And lastly, you talked about having a meeting with the potential buyers. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, what the, I mean, you've done focus group kinds of things. Now, actually, there are people that have seen the plans and have expressed an interest. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what kinds of people are they the buyers? Are they representatives of the buyers? What age group? Do they live in the city? Well, you know, the answer to the question is better than I can ask them. So I'd like to hear about that. And in particular, how many cars they would be bringing to the city, because I think that traffic is a big concern again. Answer some of those questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Would you like me to address those now?
Sure.
Okay. Let me go through them one by one. Parking on streets. As you all know, this is a constant issue in the city. The cities are public, the streets are public. Do I think that somebody might have a party here in one of the cottages, or there might be a Christmas party and people would park on Fowler or even Ellison? I think that could happen. I also think it's possible that somebody on Railroad Avenue, one of the other houses, might have a Christmas party and people would park on Fowler or Ellison. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing, and we've heard over many years now the concern that people tend to feel that the parking spaces on the street in front of their houses are their parking places, and we know that as the city urbanizes, that can't happen. Trash pickup, it's our intention not to have dumpsters, but to have the same size trash cans, several of them for recycling, several for regular trash, and they would be out on the curb and picked up just the same as the other houses on Railroad Avenue. So there won't be any banging dumpsters. Whenever the trash trucks come, they come and they pick up the trash on Railroad Avenue from the 4 houses there, as well as then subsequently from the cottages. Issue of headlights, it seems to me the only possible area that could be a concern is when these cars pull into the carport, and we have proposed a 7-foot fence with a possible 2-foot lattice addition on top of that if it's allowed by the city. We would work with our neighbor to be sure that that fence is solid, and it would be impossible for any headlights to intrude next door. You asked that we talk a little bit about our potential buyers. We have quite a long list of the folks who were there last night. Almost exactly half were single women who only own 1 car, and half were couples, almost all of whom own 2 cars. I will tell you there was quite a lot of discussion about how they could go about leaving 1 car behind. We think we can make good headway, particularly with our proposed TDM, and we think that that's accomplishable so that there will be adequate parking. Age range, I would say the youngest person was probably in their early 60s, and the eldest probably in mid-70s or so. That's kind of as much as I can tell you at this point.
Thank you very much. Let's open it up to other questions. Ms. Hardy.
Council, before you move on, you may want to have a motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, I move we meeting past 10 o'clock.
We have a second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, we will continue. Ms. Hardy.
Great. I also wanted to echo Mr. Z's thanks to the public who came out and written to us. I took copious notes, and I also appreciated the developer being responsive to the feedback we gave at work session, providing that side-by-side view. I think that was very helpful to understand how the comments are being addressed. Based on my copious notes, though, I did want to run through a couple other things. I think some of them we discussed in work session last week, but for our benefit again and for the public's benefit, I thought it'd be useful to make sure that we were all on the same page about this. And maybe some of this might be better addressed by staff as well. The 3 versus 4 houses by right, I know that was some debate last week, and I saw that in the report there were 4 houses. Have we confirmed that 4 would be allowable?
They provided a sketch plat where it looks like it's possible. Without doing a full subdivision review, I'd hate to commit to a yes or no, but it does look like it's very possible you could do 4 lots.
If I could just interrupt, I mean, I think that's something that zoning staff could do in fairly short work in terms of if you've got a sketch, have someone just look at it. I don't think it needs to have hours and hours of analysis. At least that's my general understanding of how looking at a subdivision plat.
I think that's essentially what we have. We've been given a sketch, and it seems like it's plausible that 4 lots could be created. There's enough area to create 5, but that's really difficult. It's most likely that would be impossible. And so I think what we're saying is we think 4 is pretty plausible. The reason we're not saying it is a slam dunk, because through the subdivision process, it's pretty rigorous, and there could be things that come up that would make that 4th lot, might raise some issues with it. But based on that initial look, with a fairly quick look at it, 4 lots seems doable.
I mean, I would just ask you to take a proper look at it and also see if there's a building envelope for each. In other words, you may have a lot, but it's so narrow that you can't build a house on. I think it's relevant to our discussion, either tonight or at a later point, of whether there are 4 lots or 3, and if there are 4, what's the building footprint for each of those lots? In fact, are they really, quote, buildable?
I believe there's a sketch in the packet that you received.
This is Antoinette Isherwood. She works for Walter L. Phillips. She's our engineer for the project. She did the plan that's in your packet that shows not only the 4 lots, but the building envelopes for each of those 4 lots.
Well, again, I'd like city staff, I appreciate it. I have total confidence in Walter Phillips, the excellent engineering firm, but I think city staff's the one that needs to decide whether, in fact, there are 4 lots, and that would be useful information that I think for at least for some of us. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Ms. Conley.
I'm confused, Mr. Young or Ms. Isherwood. Have we seen that plan? It's in this packet, and I
Yes,
didn't
it's in our
come
packet.
across it.
It's in the packet.
Sorry.
And Mr. Shields, I assume that's the one that you said we've reviewed.
It's attachment 5.
That's the one I looked at. Okay, so speaking of subdivision, in several citizen letters and comments, people were commenting that this would be subdividing substandard lots, and I wanted to confirm this is not the case. This is a special exception and not a rezoning and not a subdivision, correct?
Right, this is just a special exception, no rezoning is required. There's 3 existing lots, which would actually need to be consolidated into 1 lot. So no re-subdivision would be required.
No substandard subdivision, which I think was the concern of some of the letters I read.
Right.
Okay. Moving on, the 6 feet versus 20 feet. So my understanding is the majority of the separation between the buildings is 20 feet, with the exception of the bay windows, which are 6 feet at those points. I think I heard that the fire marshal said that was okay based on the materials being used and the other kind of fire safety measures put in. Has the fire marshal signed off on the 20 feet versus 6 feet point?
He's okay with it because of the materials provided and the house is being sprinklered, and then the building official has looked at it too. Have windows next to siding, it's okay. I don't want to quote the building official, but you can write.
Let me address it, if I may. We've worked for many hours with the building official. The building separation is in fact a building code, both state and Falls Church City building code issue. What alters what would normally be a required separation is the fact that the units under the code are sprinkled, and therefore that allows those points to be closer than they would otherwise be permitted. But this is definitely, obviously, building permits wouldn't be issued, site plans wouldn't be approved if that weren't the case, but it is the case.
Another, I think, public comment mentioned that the land was previously declared undevelopable. I don't know if we have a comment or response to that, or if there's any history or context on what that meant.
For years, as people have come to us to discuss this site, we have provided information about the legal status of the street. We have provided information about the fire marshal's concerns about that 14-foot width. And so our response to essentially everybody who's come in to inquire about that parcel, we've had that conversation about those two things. And so unbuildable is not the correct term. The limited or the substandard access to it has been a concern. Now, how that ultimately would get resolved through a building permit process was, we were never definitive about that, because we would need an application to review and we would comment on it. But people would come to us and ask us generically, what are the issues here? And we would have that, essentially those conversations about the access.
This wasn't like an official term we had deemed the site. It was more about access and therefore limiting the types of projects that could go there if the access wasn't improved. Is that my understanding correct?
That's correct.
Let's see, stormwater improvements. I think I heard the response from the developer that in the forthcoming site plan, they do intend to propose stormwater improvements not only for the site itself, but also hopefully helping the neighborhood. I don't know if we have those details yet, but I would emphasize, just based on hearing the concerns from the neighborhood, that that would definitely be helpful to the community as a whole. Parking. The one comment I did hear that I thought was very salient to this kind of community was actually handicapped parking and making sure the spaces are wide enough for easy access in and out. And so I would ask that we relook at the carport situation and make sure that we either can accommodate handicapped use as necessary or consider wider spaces.
The spaces as proposed are 9 feet wide, and we'll certainly look at the handicap parking.
And my last one is actually just recapping, and again, the Fair Housing and Housing for Older Persons Act, which I spent a lot of time reading, even though I'm not an attorney. So my understanding is, again, based on HOPA, at least 80% must be occupied by 55 and up. And my understanding from hearing the discussion is that we've had both internal and external counsel tell us that the developer can be more restrictive than that and can go to 100% being occupied by 55 and up, and further covenant that there will be an age restriction of no residents below the age of 18. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe the developer or the applicant, should they choose to do that with a project under the Housing for Older Persons Act, can impose additional restrictions to the 80% occupied by someone 55 or older.
And if that restriction was also put in the VCs, that gives the city the right and ability to enforce that as well?
If there are, yes, the city can enforce what's in the voluntary conditions. So if that's one of the deed restrictions they put in and they voluntarily put in the concessions that they will maintain that deed restriction and enforce it, then the city would have the right under zoning laws to enforce that as part of the restrictions on the project.
I think that's all my questions. I was also glad to see that there's an update to a future community meeting. I hope that the neighbors can work constructively with the developers team on the remaining issues.
Mayor Connolly?
Right, so following up on some of the questions that other people had, I guess I have another parking question. Someone referenced the Flower Building and how tight the parking spaces are there, and that we do not want to have that similar situation. At the time the Flower Building, and I just want to confirm this, at the time the Flower Building was built, that was the city regulation on the width of parking places?
That's correct.
And since then, City Council has changed that ordinance so that we have wider parking places.
That's also correct.
That's also correct.
Probably as a direct result of the two tight spaces at the Flower Building.
Right.
As you and I both know, since we deal with them every day.
I try not to.
I don't blame you.
So we are not setting ourselves up for that situation.
Correct.
That is a big concern of mine, just as
9
far as...
feet
9 feet, and you're also going to look at handicap spaces?
Correct.
Per Ms. Hardy's question. Okay. The storm that we had last week, someone referenced that the large storm we had Friday morning and how much flooding there was around the city and around the region. In our work session, we talked about a 10-year flood, and 1 inch of water is going to have to be retained on site. Would last Friday's storm be considered a 10-year flood event? Not quite.
No.
Okay, so it would be even more rain than we had last Friday would then be taken care of.
Correct.
Okay,
A lot more.
a lot more. Okay. I'm wondering about the.
And excuse me, that is a requirement of the code. This is not something that we can, the city or anybody else can sort of willy-nilly say, gee, don't worry about it. That has to be done, and I can assure you that Public Works is pretty diligent about making darn sure that it's done in a proper way and measurable and all those things.
Right.
We have a great deal of effort that's gone in by Walter L. Phillips to do those calculations and make sure that will be the case.
Right, okay. And then my last question is for Ms. McCosker, and that's about the conflict of interest question that was raised by several people. I'm actually a little horrified that that's come up as an issue, because I think anybody who runs for city council, most of us, have accepted money from a lot of people, including Mr. Young. There are many other people in this room who I have written letters of recommendation for, I have worked with on projects, I have accepted money from. So I just need to know from you, what is the conflict of interest related to this? Is there any?
There's those kinds of election contributions are reported to the Virginia Election Commission, and you all have your reporting forms that you have to file. And those become available to the public should people seek to look at them. They do not, however, create conflicts of interest under the Virginia Conflicts of Interest Act, which governs when you, as council members, can participate in transactions and when you have to disclose your interests. That involves when you have a direct interest in the matter before you, such as ownership in the property that's the subject of the action, or ownership in the business that's before you. And that's the only time the Virginia Conflict of Interest Act comes into play. So these matters are not under Virginia law. The fact that somebody from whom you might have received some contribution as part of a campaign is not part of the Conflicts of Interest Act, and it's not affected by that.
And then there was someone else suggested that they had put in a FOIA request to find out what kind of campaign donations had been received. But that doesn't actually require a FOIA request, right?
That's correct.
It's completely public information at all times.
If you file those election materials online, they're always available on the state site. And so if they're filed on paper and held by the city offices, they can be provided under FOIA, or you can people can come in and see them at any time. That's correct.
Okay. So I invite everyone to take a look at all those things and see who is giving money to the members of city council and the members of the school board that have run. I'm very confident that the people that have decided to run and sit up here, it's now 10:30 on a Monday night, who make a really tiny amount of money for the work that we do and the time we put in, are not conflicted just because of some campaign donations that we receive. I'm very confident that those of us that are doing this for the good of the whole community, and appreciate what we have heard tonight, and appreciate the work that goes into all of these things.
Other questions, Ms. Oliver?
Could I just check where we are on affordable dwelling units? I understand it's a little bit hard to have 6/10 of an affordable dwelling unit, but are we doing anything to meet that need in the city?
The answer is yes. We proposed a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund as opposed to having one of 6/10 of a unit that gets rounded up and so on. I would point out that under the code, this project is not subject to the affordable housing rules and regulations, but we have voluntarily said that we would make a donation. That has to yet be negotiated. We've made a proposal, but we haven't had the opportunity to meet with the city manager to get beat over the head about that one. But we will.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question relating to parking and as it pertains to the caregivers who may be somewhat more likely to be present in this development than in some other development with a different age demographic. I mean, first off, I'm quite confident that the total number of cars in this project are going to be no greater than what the total number of cars would be if it were 3 or certainly 4 single-family homes. But just as we go through the process, and I do hope we do go through the process, if the staff and applicant could use this as an opportunity to gather some more information for us about the comings and goings at a housing development like this as it relates to people who are helping those who are living there, you know, basically age in place. It's my expectation that most people who live here will want to stay, you know, until the very end. And my personal experience with that is that towards the end especially, it involves, you know, 24/7 help, people coming and going. At that stage, the resident typically is obviously not driving, probably has given up even owning a car, maybe some years before, so it's a one-for-one substitution in that instance, caregiver for resident. But, you know, I think it would be helpful for the community as we, I hope, develop more of these kind of housing options for older folks in town so we can become a community for all generations. That we just have a chance to understand and talk about the fact that a project like this will include some kind of caregiver component. Maybe in a community like this, it might be one caregiver who could, you know, rotate around to several of the houses, which would be a very efficient way to handle it. But just as we go through the process, if you could just give us a little more information on that.
Be glad to do that. Let me just point out that one of the reasons that we have the, I'll call it guest room, in the common house is to provide for the possibility that there could be a caregiver who, just as you described, is perhaps looking in on several folks or hired by one or whatever, but there would, from a parking point of view, there would likely be a one-for-one substitution. But we'll certainly gather more information on that.
Are there other questions? I have one for the city attorney. The developer has indicated that they would like to restrict the age of occupants to 18 or older, which I understand and I think is relevant to our discussion. You had mentioned that they can do that under federal law.
Yes.
Let me ask you, are you aware of case law relating to enforceability of that in terms of having a jurisdiction actually enforce that? I know they may be able to agree to that. Or is there case law on whether a jurisdiction can enforce that agreement that you're aware of?
I have not, I can look into that. I have not gone into depth to determine whether I can find any cases where that's been enforced. However, what I have looked at are the provisions of the Fair Housing Act and the statements about that law, which make it very clear that that's a permissible limitation for an operator of sort of elder housing to impose on the project.
And I understand what you're saying,
Right.
which is essentially that someone can self-impose this on themselves.
Right.
But then the question really is, given that that may be part of some people's consideration of this project and the fiscal impact or whatever's been proffered, can in fact the city enforce it itself? Are there any limitations to the city enforcing this self-imposed restriction?
And I understand, and I have not found a case where that has been done. However, it would be my general impression, and I will look into the specifics of the question that you've asked, because I recognize it's not something that I've looked at specifically. However, I do believe that, like so many things, when it is part of the project that's presented by an applicant and is part of what the city then relies on to approve it, it should be enforceable as part of the zoning. However, I understand that the question is about this specific thing, and as I said, that's not something that I have specifically delved into the research on at this point, and I will do that.
Okay. Also, just I guess a half question, half comment to the developer about the buffer for the park. I know you're talking about a 7-foot board fence, maybe board-on-board fence. I would just suggest to you that maybe we can do something a little bit less permeable. You know, I know what a board-on-board fence is, and I think something that is a better screening would probably be appreciated by your immediate neighbor, particularly if you got 10 headlights or 13 headlights coming in multiple times a day and night. And so I'd give some consideration to that. Maybe there's a landscape package that can come with it to tighten up that.
Let me just address that, Mr. Mayor, if I may. We have, in fact, one of our members has talked with the immediate neighbors and agreed that should the project be approved, or even before that, we will sit down with them and go over types of fencing and all that sort of thing. But I would also point out that there is an incredibly thick requirement for transition screening. So not only will there be a fence, but there will be evergreen trees and there will be shrubs. I don't think any lights are going to be penetrating next door.
Well, I would just nonetheless suggest that you have that conversation. I could imagine
certainly
the
will.
first couple of years that there actually could be some light diffusing through, but I don't want to get in that argument here other than just say that I would recommend you have that conversation with
Be
your
happy
neighbor.
to do that.
I tell you, before we get into comments and move to a motion one way or the other, I'm going to open it up to anyone else who did not speak, who chose to wait to speak to this matter, and I think probably almost everybody did. Seeing we've got one person. All right. Yes, please go ahead and fill it out afterwards so we don't have to wait, but state your name and address for the record and then fill out a card for the record.
Yeah, Dr. Jack Gosnold, 324 Little Falls Street. I've done a lot of work on this kind of cottage community, or it's also known by some people as pocket neighborhoods. I dislike the second term. A number of years ago, reared in South Carolina, I won the mathematics championship for the state. I like numbers. Mr. Suh brought up the number that there were a number of people here who were expressing negatives and a few who were expressing positives. I didn't keep down the numbers, but it was about 4 to 1. But the number that jumped out at me was that every one of the people who had a concern with this particular project, every one of them was unanimous in supporting the idea of these projects. And I think that's important. They fit with this city. They let the city go forward and be a model. The city likes to think of itself in terms of comparison with Alexandria and Arlington and Fairfax County. That's a pea comparing itself to a freight car full of peas. But in any case, but here is a chance to be different about it. But you've done one thing in which you've really cut yourselves off. And that is that all of the comparable cottage communities across the United States of the small size, not the ones with 3 bedrooms in them, but they're from 20,000 to 30,000 square feet each. You set this number, I think it's ridiculous, I think it doesn't fit at all, of minimum of 45,000. If you want more cottage communities, you're not going to find another 45,000 square foot plot here. And you can make a beautiful cottage community on 25,000 square feet. I've even got one in mind. I have no financial connection to it whatsoever, but I've designed it. I'm going to send you how it would look, and it would not have the neighborly problems that this one has. I'm not speaking against this one. I think there's some things that need to be adjusted on it. I'm going to do that. But I got one other thing, and I hope you can get some enjoyment out of this one. On the no 18-year-old kids there, and you're starting with people who are 55. I'm from South Carolina. We had a state senator, state senator, so United States senator, who married at 66. And after he married at 66, he fathered 4 children. So you may have that little problem with your active 55-year-olds if they're on the question of what they're going to do with the 18-year with the little baby that just shows up. That was just my little joke. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Let's move on now to comments or anything else from up on high. Mr. Z, you ready? Did you say you have a motion? Okay, go ahead.
Mayor, I move to refer TR 17-15 out to the following boards, commissions, and community organizations: the Planning Commission, Architecture Advisory Board, Economic Development Authority, Housing Commission, Human Services Advisory Council, Environmental Sustainability Council, Tree Commission, Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, Recreation, and Parks Advisory Board, Arts and Humanities Council, Falls Church Library Board of Trustees, Historical Commission, and Village Preservation and Improvement Society.
Did you get everybody? All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Duncan on the second. Before we move to a vote, are there comments that people want to make? Anyone? Vice Mayor Connolly.
I think this is a really interesting project. I think there is definitely room to tighten it up and make some changes based upon the concerns of the neighborhood. I think a vote right now to open it up to boards and commissions is a vote to open up the doors so that we can continue this conversation, because this is a great start. And I think what I've seen being on council now for 3.5 years is we start at first reading and then things get better, and then some things change, and when we get to second reading, we'll have a much better sense of what is actually before us and how it has improved based upon the comments of members of the community.
Other comments? Anyone else? Mr. Snyder.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. So, I want to thank everyone for spending so much time on this project so far. Just for the record, I've never accepted and never will accept money from developers. So let me put that aside. So I'm listening to a lot of positives about this. First of all, the age 55 housing, middle housing. We need more diversity and maintain our diversity in the community. All of that sounds good, and I'm totally in agreement with that. That cottage housing is an interesting concept that's worth exploring. And then I hear specifics on this project that they'll deal with the existing stormwater issue, that it will enhance fire safety, that it, of course, will further the diversity in the community objective, and it has positive tax benefits. And yet the neighborhood doesn't support it. So it seems to me that we have a fundamental disconnect here, which we need to find a way to resolve. When I walked the site and I saw that the parking was right up against the area that abuts an adjoining homeowner, if I were that adjoining homeowner, I wouldn't like that either. And there are other major points that the neighborhood has made. My experience with SE projects, regardless of the type of project, is the project ultimately goes to completion, or at least approval, when the neighborhood's legitimate concerns are addressed, real dialogue occurs, and we have a project that, at least for most people, including the neighborhood, is a win-win. Doesn't mean the neighborhood has a veto, but it means the neighborhood is a key player, a key stakeholder. So, but we do have a very serious disconnect. It's very obvious from tonight, it's obvious from the written comments. And as I said during the work session, we simply have to get this resolved if this project is going to move forward. So, and unfortunately, my experience with SE projects in the past is this first vote is deemed as a supporting vote and tends to shift the ability to negotiate and mediate in a very dramatic way. So for all those reasons, I'll be voting no on this motion, and voting no in the hopes that it will encourage conversation and dialogue, that with all the positives in this project, that the neighborhood issues can be and will be addressed in the kind of dialogue that needs to occur, in my opinion, for this project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Oliver?
So as I listened to the public comment this evening, I heard a lot of anguish and a lot of loss on the part of adjacent homeowners, a sense that somehow this project threatens what they thought they had in their home. And I can appreciate that sort of sense of feeling like, you know, I'm really going to lose out by this. I don't know if you're familiar, but I live in the shadow of 301 West Broad, and I went through that whole process in which the neighbors were concerned about having an 8-story building looming over their homes. But I also saw how our community took a slightly different approach than your community has taken. And that approach was to say, something's going to go in here. Let's work with the developer to make sure that our concerns are met as best possible. Not, let's change it completely around to something that we would dream up to have here, but let's figure out how we can work with the developer so that our legitimate concerns are addressed. And I think as we go through the boards and commissions process, there's a great opportunity for dialogue. You know, you can go and you can hear what the boards and commissions are saying. These are people who are volunteers from the city, who have a passion in a particular aspect of the city, and you have developed some expertise in that area. And they will look at the concerns that you've raised, and they will look at other concerns that they've identified. And they will try to make sure that this project is as flexible and as accommodating of the neighbors as it can be. And I believe that it's important that we send the project out into this process so that as you have raised questions and concerns which have caused staff and the developer to respond and to try to adjust and to make things better, that going through this process will occur as well. So I would ask you, I totally understand the sentiments that we heard from, 80% of the people who spoke tonight. I really do. But I'm going to vote to send this out into the process because I think there is a need for this type of project within the city. And I think that it behooves all of us to see if we can find a way to make this possible on this site. And if it goes through that whole process, even though I'm voting to send it out there now, if it goes through that whole process and I don't think we found a way to meet the needs of the city, that's a completely different vote that happens at the end of it.
Okay, other comments? Anyone else have any additional comments? Okay, I'll give my comments then. First off, I would like to thank all the folks who came out tonight and all the folks who have an interest and involvement in this case. I know it's very personal when it's in your backyard, and I think all up here understand that. There's a lot to like about this project. I think your environmental aspects, environmental sustainability aspects are quite impressive. Geothermal, solar, and a lot of the other things you're doing here are really cutting edge. The concept as well is very interesting, an idea, but I think there's still a number of unresolved questions, both from last week and as were raised tonight. There's just too many unresolved issues for me to vote to move this forward tonight. I think additional time would be helpful, frankly, to everyone in this process. I suspect that's probably not going to happen tonight, but if it does move forward, there will be that opportunity as it goes beyond to boards and commissions. But I would urge everyone to continue to work together to try to make this project as good a project as can be before it comes back to council. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Does anyone else have anything else to say? If not, why don't we go ahead and move to a vote. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
No.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
No.
And the motion carries 5-2.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item. Thank you all for coming out. We appreciate it. Sure, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then move on to bike share. So 5-minute break, everyone. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started or get finished. Mr. Shields, are we ready to go on to our bike share item here?
Yes,
Let's
sir,
fin-
and I will
Let's
turn
finish
it.
high.
That's it?
Let's finish high tonight.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
We're very excited about tonight's presentation, and I'm going to turn it straight over to Mr. Paul Stoddard for the presentation. I just want to point out also Carrie Odierno has been a key in this as well, and she is here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, Mayor Tarter and members of City Council. In the interest of the clock and time, I've been asked to move through the presentation briskly. It's normally a 20-minute presentation. I'm going to try and slim it down to 5. So if there are points that I missed or things you want to bring up, I'm happy to take those questions. The slides briefly talk about what is bike share, what's the policy guidance, what's the latest draft in terms of where the station's going to go, and then lastly, project implementation schedule. In terms of bike share, I think most of you already know that bike share is a regional system of shared transportation. So the idea is shared bicycles that are stored in these docks and used for relatively short 30-minute one-way trips. Capital Bike Share membership gives you unlimited access to 30-minute rides, and a membership can be as inexpensive as $85 a year. The bike share system is operated by a third party throughout the entire region. This provides for a consistency of user experience. It also means that all the requirements for maintaining the system are handed off to another group. When I say a regional system, I mean regional. This is the only transportation network in the region that spans all these different jurisdictions and is run by a single operator. You've got a total of 440 stations across the region and 3,700 bikes. It touches District of Columbia, Arlington County, City of Alexandria, Montgomery County, Fairfax County, and soon City of Falls Church. Motivation, why bring bike share to the City of Falls Church? This is an opportunity to further extend and connect the city to the regional transportation network, especially the transit network. There are 2 metro stations on the city's borders, East Falls Church and West Falls Church. They both have the city name in them, but neither of them are actually inside the city. Bike share can often be used for what's called those first mile, last mile connections. So if you're a little bit too far to walk from home to a metro station or the office is a little too far to get there on foot, bike share can fill that role. It's also a way to relieve pressure on the regional road network, that in-town trips that switch from car to bike are a way to open up that capacity on the regional highway system. Policy guidance. The city's long been planning for an expansion of Capital Bike Share into the city. It began in 2014 when the city adopted a new transportation master plan, Mobility for All Modes. That planning continued when the city adopted its bicycle master plan in 2015. Those plans are about expanding mode choice and providing more options. Moving through the plan. There are a number of public inputs that have been feeding the station locations. I'm going to jump to a summary slide and show you agreement amongst those things. Policy guidance in the bike master plan, a consultant study, and general public input in a crowdsourcing map are all talking about putting locations, bike share locations along Broad Street, Washington Street, Eden Center, the commercial areas of the city, and connecting to the metro station. There's less agreement on other locations, and you'll see that in the latest draft map, that's where the focus is, on connections to the metro station, East Falls Church, West Falls Church, and then running down the city's commercial corridors and serving the Eden Center as well. I'm going to jump back to one previous slide to explain why the staff recommendation lands on 14 stations. Here we are. So there are 2 costs that go into running this kind of a project. The first is capital, that's what you need to get the thing started, and then the other is operating, what you need to keep it going. In terms of capital funding, the city initially applied for $2 million to install up to 16 stations. At the time, the thought that the capital acquisition was going to cost about $1 million, and then the other $1 million of that $2 million would be used for the soft costs necessary to get the project up and running. Station costs have come down since the city first applied, and now capital acquisition is only expected to run between $430,000 and $680,000, so there's plenty of capital funding at this moment to implement this project. The bigger constraint is on annual operating costs. I think, as everybody knows, the operating budgets on the City of Falls Church are often tight, and so staff is looking particularly at how can we break even with this project, meaning how can the annual operating costs be offset by user fee recovery, advertising, sponsorship, and other grant funding that's available. Operating grant funding is difficult to come by, but the city did recently win $500,000 through the Transform I-66 project. The annual cost to operate a station is about $13,000, so for 10 to 16 stations, you're looking at $130,000 to $210,000. Looking at what other jurisdictions have been able to do in terms of a user fee recovery, 70% in DC down to 63% in Arlington and Alexandria. The city contracted with a consultant who projects a 35% user fee recovery. Adding other sources of revenue, that jumps up to 62%. That means that the annual operating support based on the number of stations ranges from $71,000 to $123,000. That $500,000 operating grant that I mentioned is available for 5 years of support. So looking at the total 5-year operating cost, the break-even point for this project right now is at about 13 stations. That's how we landed on that recommendation for 14 stations, which is different. But if I jump back to that map, you'll see that 2 of these stations are actually located outside the city's boundaries. Station number 12 is in Arlington County, and this station is part of their existing expansion plans. Station number 1 is located at the West Falls Church Metro, and Fairfax County has been installing and is deploying more capital bike share stations. So the expectation on city staff part is that we can partner with these other jurisdictions to cover those costs. These station locations identify approximate intersections or mid-block locations. Some final positioning will have to be done in terms of providing adequate sunlight. These stations are solar powered and need access to 4 hours of light a day. There are also clearance and visibility requirements in terms of vehicle access, pedestrian access, motorist access. Stations are relatively large, about 35 feet long, and so additional work is needed to identify the specific locations. There are a number of different ways to fit these into urban environments. You can put them in parallel parking spaces, underutilized surface parking lots, or along overly generous or overly wide sidewalks. Public schedule for project delivery. As I mentioned, planning for this got started with the Mobility for All Modes plan, which launched in 2013. Here we are in 2017, about a year after funding was awarded, and the expectation for ribbon cutting is in 2018 with the first phase. Phase 1 would be those stations for which easements aren't needed. Phase 2 would be those stations for which easements are needed. City staff has gone out to a number of groups, stakeholder groups, that have all supported this project, both in securing funding and in further implementation. Recap, these are the things covered in the presentation, and given the time tonight, the expectation is not for an in-depth conversation tonight, but as part of future work sessions and other council events, and these are the questions to seed conversation for those events. First, is breaking even the right goal for city staff in terms of selecting the number of stations throughout the city? Number 2, inputs are leaning toward focusing on the commercial areas and metro connections. Is that the right way to lay out the stations? And then third, negotiating easements can slow down project delivery by as much as or more than a year. So when is it appropriate to look at repurposing city right-of-way and utilizing on-street parking spaces?
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard, for the abbreviated version of that. A couple questions. So your first question is break even what we should be striving for. So in general, I think I'm supportive of that, especially when I look at the outlook for future budget years. Breaking even is a good thing. My question is 13 enough for critical mass in the city, both to connect us to the metro stations and connect us to Arlington and Tysons? And if it meets that criteria as well, I'd be supportive of starting with 13 until we have more money.
The short answer to that is yes. Generally, you're looking at an expansion of somewhere between 6 and 8 stations. That's what City of Alexandria was launching with to serve Old Town Alexandria and their Del Rey neighborhood. When our consultants looked at the size of the city and the amount of area we were trying to cover, they recommended a minimum of 10 stations.
Second question on your point number 2 is, should we focus on commercial areas, metro connections? So I would say also, I agree with that. My only concern when we looked at the map, if we could bring that back up, is that the majority of those stations were on Broad Street in Washington, which I know are our main commercial corridors. Unfortunately, they're not our very bikeable corridors. And so, I mean, as a biker myself, I would never bike on Broad Street. And so I would have concerns about someone picking up their bike there and then trying to get to Park Avenue or Maple, one of the easier to bike streets that go east-west or north-south, or getting the W&OD. And so I don't know if there's a balance between getting in places where we have the right-of-way already, because that's clearly a big challenge for us, is getting access, but then also making sure that it's a safe and easy place for people to bike. So
yes, the bike corridors in the city, instead of Broad, Park Avenue is identified, and instead of Washington, Maple and Little Falls are identified. These station locations are approximate, thinking about these as being approximate to about 450 or 500 feet, which is about the length of a block. So as long as these stations are within about a block of these points, it'll serve the functional purpose of providing access to these areas, so we can look at the specifics of how close they get to Broad versus Park or Maple.
And maybe if we can just do signage at the stations that tell people where the bikeable routes are in the city. I mean, I'm guessing people who might be picking up a bike share may not be as familiar with the city as we are. And so we could point them that, hey, the WNOD is a quarter mile this way north, or, head this way if you want to bike, into Arlington, or head this way if you want to bike into Tyson's.
Absolutely. Every Capital Bike Share station includes a large panel map showing where all the Capital Bike Share stations are in the vicinity. That can also show bike route information. I know I've used that in the Crystal City area to actually find my way around. They're a helpful tool.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Vice Mayor Connolly.
Thanks, Mr. Stoddard. I'm very excited about this. I'm glad the map is up. I'm going to talk really fast, just like you did. The key on the map covers a gigantic part of the Falls Church, and I think there should be at least one station at TJ, because I think that would serve that whole entire neighborhood. If you live on, I don't know, Poplar, it's too far of a walk to get up to Broad Street, too far of a walk to get to Washington Street. But if you go to TJ, that's just a natural gathering area. Tons of people walk there. They're used to walking there. I think that would really activate our system. I'm wondering about other locations that we own as opposed to ones we can get easements on. And I'm sure you've looked at that and just skipped over real fast. But West End Park, are we looking there to put one in?
I'll throw out that, and I think what we can do when we update this map is better show the service areas that these stations will cover. These stations are generally placed about a quarter mile apart to be a comfortable walking distance between stations. So I think if we add quarter mile buffers or quarter mile circles to these station locations, I think there is a station shown at the intersection of Park Avenue and Northwest Street, and that would be a service point for West End Park.
Okay, and I guess that's where Founders Row is?
Yes.
So that's a place where we have an easement because it was part of the approved plan.
Yes, not only an
Right.
easement, but also a commitment to fund the station for the life of the project.
Okay.
And I will throw this out to council. I'll recommend to council that as projects come in, it's that operating support that long-term that's so important.
So on your, one of these pages here, you mentioned that you have policy, consultant, and public input.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get the public input from?
The public input, I'm going to jump back 2 slides. This is a crowdsourcing map, meaning that anyone can go onto this website and drop a pin about where they recommend a station go. This was not specifically launched by the City of Falls Church staff. It was launched by Bike Arlington, which is a pro-biking collaborative in Arlington County. The website was launched in 2011, and so when I say public input, what I mean is that city staff has been looking at the comments that have been received through this source to date.
Okay, so then the next step for our staff would be to shop this around to the rest of the community.
Yes,
Get
we've gone
further,
out to some
deeper
of the key
input.
stakeholders of boards and commissions. We do need to come up with a campaign to get the general public engaged in this.
And I would agree with Ms. Hardy that if 13 stations is enough to serve us and be robust, then we should definitely try to break even.
All right, other comments, questions? Ms. Oliver?
So I want to take a slightly different tack. I agree with the idea that we don't want this system to cost us a lot. But if we are going to invest in multimodal, I think we need to be prepared to think a little bit about how we might be able to go a little bit bigger and really change the way the people operate in this city. For example, putting a station at TJ, if it drew from those residential areas, it might, have more people biking who would otherwise be driving to the metro station or driving all the way to work. And so I think that, I agree the critical mass is 10, and I understand the rationale, and nobody wants to spend more money than they have to. I also think about the fact that when you think about break even, we need to think about the other costs of the other modes of transportation that this might replace. We know, for example, that at one time resurrecting the 3T bus line, we were told was going to cost us what, Mr. Shields, $500,000 a year? A couple more bike stations is a bargain. And I realize that not everybody can bike, but to the extent that it moves more people, I think that's helpful, and we need to look a little broader than that.
All right, other questions, comments? All right, I've got a few. One, I hope that going forward we can find a way to also get developer contributions to this, and this is something for the city attorney to think about, whether it's possible to have developer funding, part of their TDM for bike share, as part of to mitigate the traffic generated by new developments. And so even a small contribution from each new development actually can go a long way because our operating costs aren't that much. 120 grand a year is not that much. Secondly, I did not see a location at George Mason High School. And as you probably know, we're in the process of looking at whether we need 400 parking spaces and whether that's going to take up land that otherwise could be used for commercial development. And so I would definitely think that this would be a site where you have 1,500 commuters every day, including, or not including teachers. And so it's probably the biggest commuting location in the city. To my mind, whether it's kids or adults, it doesn't matter. It's a car driving somebody someplace for the most part. So I would suggest giving that a thought, particularly as the campus site develops. We're going to probably need more creative ideas to reduce parking. I tell you what, given the late hour, I think I'll just end with that. Ms. Oliver?
I was going to say, and that stretch of East Broad Street, again, if we want to try to change people's behavior and we want to try to take a look at how we can get more people to choose to cycle, I realize that from that Broadmont neighborhood, a lot of people can walk to East Falls Church Station, but they can't necessarily walk all the way downtown. You know, there's a park there, and we've got Jesse Thackeray, and I guess I would just look at whether we can bridge that gap in any way.
Okay, I'm going to now open this up to public comment. We do have one speaker who submitted a speaker slip. I apologize, I can't read this very well. I got the first name is Tim, but the last name is puzzling me. Is it Rund? Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Paul does a great job of telling us, that those of us that bike, about these kinds of things, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I agree with Letty about the lanes. I use bike share almost every day in DC. I love it. So the two questions I had is that generally bike share, the whole concept of bike share that came out of the West Coast that's actually been populated. I lived in London. We had bike share. You go all over Europe. They've got them, right? Generally, the policy is that you also do bike lanes that you have. Paul and I have talked a lot about this. We're a great city, but we really don't have a whole lot of bike lanes. And when you look at Washington and you look at the other ones, it's problematic. And so I think that as a city, one of the things that you've got to think about is that, say you're coming in on, I think it's West Street, you're coming in from Arlington, there's a bike lane and it stops right when you get to Falls Church. I don't know what to tell you guys. If you want this to work, you're going to have to put in some bike lanes. All through Arlington, there's bike lanes. It works really, really well. In the district, I bike all over the district, and there are bike lanes. Michael bikes all over the district, right? So I love it. It's a great idea. It's very nice. And so the only other question I had was about revenue. Like in my case, if I have a fob, I've already paid my money to the system. Paul, I don't know where that money goes. I don't know how the city would recoup it. I also do a lot of the $2 bike trip days, depending on if I'm taking other people biking with me and stuff. But it's a great way to get around the city. I just worry that right now it'd be really dangerous on Broad Street or on Washington Street. The bike trail's great, but I think you've got limited. I think you need some bike paths.
Yeah, I think we get that as well, and we have got the bike master plan, and there's a lot of other things that are sort of brewing right now. But your point's well taken.
I will say that I'm not the only one working on it. Carrie O'Nino, who's here tonight, Stephanie Rogers, who's not here tonight. These are all people who are contributing to this system and making it a success.
Thank you very much. Unless we've got some more questions and comments. All right, let's keep them coming.
Mine's just a process question. When is this coming to work session, and will we spend more time on your presentation, or can we get a copy of it sent to us electronically?
The information was included in the package. We can certainly look at getting that copy out if it didn't get included correctly. I think it will come to a work session in fairly short order. We can look at the exact dates. I think one thing that may be coming up to you for action, that $500,000 operating grant, the city does need to take a positive action to secure that. And so staff may be looking at bringing back an action to enter into what's called a funding agreement with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission.
Okay, Mr. Snyder and Ms. Hardy.
Yeah, thanks much for the great staff work, and thanks for all the comments from council. It's been really hard to get funding for this because there's so much pressure to only fund big regional, primarily road projects. So the fact that we've gotten this far is great. Let's just keep it up and get it done, and thanks to everybody involved.
Ms. Hardy?
Sorry, one quick question. On the funding point, I heard you say, Paul, that we had plenty of capital because we had $2 million and it's only going to cost us between $400 and $700. Does that mean we can use that money for other things?
So what that means, this money was transferred to the city from Fairfax County, that there was an intense lobbying effort to secure funding for this. This project, at all the projects the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority was looking at for their fiscal year 17 funding program, this project alone garnered the second most results, and it was one of the highest performing projects in the NVTA slate of projects. However, it was difficult to secure NVTA specific funds. Fairfax County came to the plate and transferred $2 million of their RSTP funds to the city to make that happen. A lot of that was due to the large support of FAB, the Fairfax Alliance for Better Biking. They submitted hundreds of comments in support of this project, so I do want to note their participation and their importance to this project. The other money in that, of that capital budget is to do exactly the kinds of thing that Mr. Rund was talking about, which is filling out the city's network of bike routes. So the city has a number of bike routes identified in its bike master plan. As part of installing these bike share locations, I think it would be consistent with the funding source to go ahead and connect all these bike share stations with bicycling facilities, or connect to stations in other jurisdictions.
All right, thank you very much. Unless there's anything else on this, why don't we move on? We do have a closed session before the night is done or before the next morning. So, all right, thank you very much,
sir.
Mr. Stoddard. Thank you for coming this evening, and we look forward to hearing more about this really great project.
Thank you.
All right, the next item, what is the next item? Campus, is the campus project update, is that next on our list, Mr. Shields? Or did I miss something? Is there, I don't think there are any consent agenda items. Mr. Shields, is that the next item of business?
I could provide a written report unless the council wants a verbal report on the campus project.
All right, what say you? Okay with a written report?
There was a question that came up at the work group meeting last week about the next time council would be able to get together with the school board on the feasibility study and the economic working group study.
So currently, it's been discussed as being June 5th as the joint meeting. There was a question as to whether that could be moved instead to the prior week. That's a fifth Monday, and so there needs to be some deal-making done on what meeting gets dropped somewhere else in order to make that happen.
I think I had a preliminary okay from the mayor pending we would identify another date. I think it just would be wise for us to meet earlier than later on the campus project, especially if the school board's going to meet on the 30th. There's no point in having two separate sessions about it because I think we'll need the time later on in the schedule.
We'll send out a note just to confirm that, so I guess for tonight's purpose, if you could maybe pencil off that May 30th night as a potential joint session with the school board. The difficulty is we were planning to have a Washington and Broad presentation by Insight, and they've been really kind of trying to gear all of their work and staff work to hit that date. So that might be hard to move.
All right, well, we'll talk about that offline. We understand the point about try to make it happen. All right, what else we got?
Are we in council member comments yet?
What's that?
Are we in comments yet?
If we're done with the campus situation. So business not on the agenda, any? Standing and regional committee and council liaison reports? All right, we're at council member comments. Have at it. Or is there something someone wanted to say? Oh, Mr. Z? Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Ms. Hardy?
Just really quick, since we're talking about bikes, Bike to School Day is on Wednesday. I don't know if anyone's watching or here, but I thought I'd mention that since we were talking about biking. It's a National Bike to School Day, and I think there's a Facebook event happening too.
I'd love to see a big rollout of that. It's great for kids to be biking to school. All right, what else we got, Mr. Snyder?
Thanks much. So I don't normally respond to letters to the editor, but this one, because I'm mentioned by name, I think I will take this opportunity to do it. There's a letter published, and let me quote, and by the way, I respect citizens to write and say whatever they want to say, and in fact, I've been in touch with the writer to see what the issues were and to discuss them in more thorough detail. But the quote is, shame on you, Mary Beth Conley, Letty Hardy, Karen Oliver, and David Snyder for placing your personal, parochial, outdated, and selfish views before the thoughts, views and desires of most of the citizens of this city. Again, I don't normally respond, but I am going to respond to this. If maintaining good schools and maintaining high-quality services, including police and public safety, is outmoded, selfish, or parochial, I respectfully disagree that that is in fact the case. Thank you.
All right, what else do we have? Any other, Mr. Duncan, do you want to respond to the letter as well?
No, I don't. It's one of the few times that letter writer has written something that didn't include my name, so, I'm on a roll. I just want to thank you all for the card that you sent from my mom. It was very nice. You passed it around last Monday probably while I wasn't here, so thanks very much. It was appreciated.
Thank you. Ms. Oliver?
Mr. Shields, could we look at rescheduling the Budget and Finance Committee meeting so that it is not the morning of Bike to Work Day?
Yeah, we do definitely need to reschedule that meeting. So I'll get back with you.
All right, is there anything else before we go into closed session? Where are we going into closed session, by the way, in the hall back there? All right, is there anything else before we go into closed session? All right, I'm going to go ahead then and read the motion to go into closed session. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Connolly.
Seconded by Councilmember
Hardy.
Passed by a voice vote of City Council. Council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 for consultation with legal counsel employed by City Council on specific legal matters requiring such advice, particularly request for consent to conflict waivers for outside counsel. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy?
Yes.
Oliver? Yes. Snyder?
Yes.
Z? Yes. Tarter? Yes. All right, let's go ahead and let's get this over with. Upon a motion made by Councilmember,
Connolly.
seconded by Councilmember,
Second, Snyder.
passed by vote of City Council, council reconvened in open session. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yeah.
Tarter? Okay, that was 11:36. Let's do our certification. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Snyder.
Snyder, seconded by Councilmember,
Duncan.
passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the City Council. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yeah.
Tarter? Yes. Okay, and do we have a motion now that we're out of closed session?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that the Falls Church City Council authorize the city manager to execute 3 conflicts waiver letters to McGuire Woods LLC in the form presented to council in closed session for representation of clients on the site at 400 North Washington and Lee Street and Park Avenue, and for the High and Middle School's campus site.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Do a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Abstain.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
And the motion carries 6-0 with 1 abstention.
Okay, is there anything else to do tonight?
Move to adjourn.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.